was an honor and a privilege to sit down with John Gilbert. He's a former M1 tank crewman turned Arabic cryptologic linguist who is now making waves in the world of Hermetic philosophy. His most recent book, Not As Above, Not As Below, How We Got the Emerald Tablet Wrong, offers a groundbreaking translation and analysis of key philosophical fragments from 9th century Arabic manuscripts. These are the oldest sources of this ancient text. For his work, John has been honored with the prestigious Order of the Gold Stone Award. With 21 years in military, spanning from tank operations to cybersecurity and intelligence, his background has uniquely prepared him for the linguistic challenges of ancient manuscripts. Join us as John unravels the true meaning behind the Emerald Tablet, correcting centuries-old misconceptions with his expertise. And we had a great time. A lot of technical challenges, so bear with us. I tried to put it back together. Look at this.
Oh, look at that.
Look
what
at
do you think, man?
Dude, it's rad. I love it, man. I love it a lot. I love it. Dude, you did a really, really amazing job. Seriously. This book was like, I couldn't put it down. I started reading. I'm not going to lie. I should have got it done in one night, but then, kids.
Well, I know how that is. I mean, I tried to write it to be fairly easy read, I mean, it's so easy to, what's the word? Sound sophistic, that's our idiom. Masonic writing is really
eloquent. How about eloquent? That's a good word.
I guess eloquent. You could go with eloquent, but not succinct enough.
No. It was amazing, man. Like I think the way you wrote it, you didn't like add a bunch of shit that you just wanted to throw in there just to throw in there. Everything you added had a purpose and a meaning, and I think you kind of even undersold the amount of research and shit you did with it. Seriously, because dude, you spent forever doing this, right? I mean, like, this is not easy.
I did. I don't even remember when I started it. There's probably a year's worth of work in that, if not a bit more. My wife was terrific. Shout out to Melinda, my wife, who when I retired from the Army, it was the end of 22. She let me just sit there and pump out a couple of books for about 12 months.
That's rad.
And I didn't make a dime. He supported me while I got my feet back under me in the civilian world and sort of did the reinvention that people have to do periodically.
That's amazing, man. There's always there's always a good woman behind a good man, right? That's how it works.
I wouldn't be able to do it without her. So there was a ton of research in that. But you know what's really weird is I've written a couple of books and a couple of long papers, and I'm thinking about things and I'm researching, but then it just hits me. Mm-hmm. I think we talked about once in an earlier conversation. I was just in the shower.
Yeah.
And either whole paragraphs to whole books will just write themselves right in my mind's eye, and then I'm just have to turn the water off and go out to the computer and start writing it, and then it's just a matter of nugging away writing it.
Yeah.
It's already written. It's just up there. It's such a weird thing how that works, but
it's happened to me. I know we've talked about this before, like where it's happened to me, and it's for me, it's happened more of messages that need to go to other people, which is weird. Which is, to me, it's like a real good friend of mine, Mike. His wife passed away from cancer, and she fought really hard for years, right? And she finally, went to her brain, and we had a conversation before she passed, and we're sitting there in her kitchen. She's like, "John, you got to take care of Mike." I'm like, "I'll do the best I can." He's got 3 girls, and so. I was in the shower and just boom, it was just Stephanie. And she's like, "Hey, tell Mike to change the sheets." And I'm like, "What the fuck? What the fuck is that?" She's like, "Tell him to change the sheets. Tell him I'm fine. Tell him to be happy. Tell him to change the sheets." And I'm like, so I hadn't seen Mike, since everything passed. And it was, a couple of weeks after that, and ran into it at a buddy's house. And I was like, "Hey, this is fucking weird, man." Cause he's not into it at all. He's not into any of this shit. Like nothing, like that. Like he just thinks I'm crazy as it is. Right. And he's a friend. But I'm like, "Listen, I don't know what this means, but she told me to tell you to change the sheets." And he just got this smile on his face, and he was like happy and sad and mad and all that at the same time. And he looked at me and he goes, "I changed the fucking sheets." he's got 3 little girls. He's got 3 girls. Right. So it's like, I don't know. Like, I don't know what that means. I had to tell him that. And like, it's something, but I mean, it was like, what is it? Like, I can't make that up. Like, why would I do that?
I've had similar experiences that started when I was younger. You get these random
Just boom.
things, and some of them have. And I'm a skeptic.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I have a background in hard sciences. My wife's a physicist. I'm a science guy.
Hmm.
Very skeptical, and I hang out with skeptics and I talk to skeptics. I'm not really one who gets on the bandwagon,
Right.
but I've got, you know, when the evidence presents itself, yeah, you can say, well, maybe I don't have an explanation for it and just
Hmm.
call it a wash. But I've seen things that just shouldn't, have happened, and you just sort of have to go with it. You're like, well, life's kind of crazy, and
Yeah.
we only have about this much bandwidth to see what we can see, and there's stuff that lies outside of that. And I think that's it's important to be curious about that, if nothing else, for darn
Oh,
sure.
of course, yeah. And I always find that if you pay more attention to it, even if you're, you don't believe it and you are a skeptic, I think it's probably the best mode to be in, and just be
Yeah,
skeptical of it, but at least accepting of it, at least bring it in, right? Bring in the data and like, put it in a pile and see
play
where
with
it
the
goes.
idea. It's
Yeah.
the same with this literature. We're talking about this sort of literary history that you find in the background of Freemasonry, the Hermetic
Hmm.
literature. So the actual ancient Hermetica that was, we're talking, plus or minus 300 around year one. The original body of work we call the Hermetica, which was, 300 BC to 380 roughly time frame. And there was a
Right.
lot going on in that region at that time, just a huge amount of works and a huge amount of thinking about spirituality and the science of the soul.
Right.
And I think if you just let that seep in and keep reading that and then read a lot of stuff to give that entire body context, then you can start maybe understanding what some of the language is talking about. But you have to be open to it, like you were saying. If you try to enact what we would call like an eisegesis, try to read our own values back into that language, like, oh, well, they meant soul here, oh, they really meant that. Like, it's probably not
Right.
going to work. You have to take on a whole new sort of way of thinking about it, and we can't get it right. We can't get it exact, but that's what I tried to do with this book was read all the material around the Emerald Tablet,
Right.
which was not written in a vacuum.
Right.
And the body of work around that, the Hermetica, wasn't written in a vacuum.
Hmm.
It's in this milieu of spiritual thinking in the Middle East for a huge period of time. I mean, think about it, 2 to 3 times the age of our country.
Right.
This was all being written and thought about. So,
And survived amazingly at some at some point, right? It survived and it existed for as long as it did.
amazing. Well, and it survived, and it's thanks to Arabic speakers, probably in Baghdad. The intellectuals at the time had preserved a lot of Greek thought and a lot of the Greco-Egyptian thought, which you find the Hermetica embedded within.
Hmm.
That was preserved in Arabic manuscripts
Right.
and got passed down to us. And part of the European Renaissance is credited towards that kickstart of those Arabic manuscripts being translated then into Latin and some of the scholarly languages in Europe at the time, and just rekindled this whole interest in things like Platonism and Pythagorean thought. And I'm no expert in that process, but that's sort of how I understand it.
Well, it's amazing. And just to give a little backstory on you, I mean, you, Arabic is not your first language, obviously.
Truth,
but
truth.
you did it, and you did it for the U.S. Army, right, for a number of years.
I did, and caveat: I'm no, I don't consider myself an expert. My spoken Arabic is
Hmm.
kind of not awesome especially anymore. I
Right.
haven't had a lot of opportunity to speak it.
Hmm.
My written and my reading Arabic has gotten actually better since I went to school. I went to Defense Language Institute in Monterey, California, and that's it's preparing you for a certain kind of thing. It's preparing you for a military job with sort of
Right.
a military set of vocabulary, sort of that sort of thing. So you come out of there being able to give a 45-minute presentation on, for example, the armored forces of Tunisia, but you probably couldn't talk to a 5-year-old about tying your shoes. It's a weird. You
It's a
don't get
comedy.
that set of vocabulary, so
Yeah,
very strange. But I did that, and I did that in the army for a little while.
yeah.
It may not be the right way that I interpret it. the more I look at these sort of, ancient languages and things, I could see just a bunch of different ways you could interpret it. But what I did was use structured analytical technique. So I noticed a lot of these translations, and I mentioned this in the book, a lot of the medieval translations, before we had a really good scholarly grasp of Arabic languages here in the West, there was no Arabic dictionary, for example, until the 1800s. Um,
which is amazing.
it's just there was a lot of the academic work hadn't been done, so there was a lot of guesswork. There was a lot of like, well, this word looks like this, so it probably means XYZ. And that's how we arrived at the definition, the sort of shorthand that we've got, that as above, so below.
Mhm.
The above is like the below, and that's not. If you were to really, really make a stretch, that could be a very unlikely translation.
Yeah. So the general idea is that the stone, anything important in this is written on a blue or a blue green or aqua or an emerald stone, right?
Yeah,
Anything that's of vast importance.
it's a symbol, if you will,
Hmm.
for um, where the gods would write important things, and this also parallels the idea of the soul. If
Hmm.
you look at the actual allegory of how the Emerald Tablet was found in this book, Secret of Creation and the Art of Nature, Apollonius, the first century philosopher magician, he he basically, at a time when he finally gives up on his search later in life, and
Right.
and kind of slumps to the ground and cries,
Hmm.
um, that he's met by his perfected self. It literally says that in those words,
Which is
his
amazing,
perfected
right?
self.
His perfected self.
Uh,
Yeah.
and the perfected self has him, go into this crypt underground, and in there he finds two things. He finds this tablet upon which is written the art of nature, and by the art I mean like the craft or the skill of nature.
Hmm.
And then there's a book called The Secret of Creation.
Hmm.
So these two things are actually a reward for a life spent journeying inward, which is the crypt, the descent into the dark crypt. And there's a lot more to the story, and I talk about it in the book.
Yeah, the book is great when it goes to the allegory of
Oh,
the story and the way that he finally gets in there and he can't,
it's
what the
wild,
part,
isn't it?
yeah, he's like, I can't, he keeps trying to get in with a flame and he can't get in with a flame. And he's like, well, I can't, it keeps getting blown out. And then I think his
Mhm.
perfected self is the one who tells him, get glass, right. And, or put the
Something
flame in
transparent.
something transparent and put,
Yeah.
the flame inside of that and transparent. And then,
Yeah,
basically,
the perfected self teaches him how to shield his flame or his light
mhm.
from this dark wind emanating from the crypt, basically emanating from within, so that he could discover these things. So the Emerald Tablet isn't like the cornerstone, upon which you build your journey. It's the reward. It's one of two rewards, incidentally, for the long journey. Because at this point, Apollonius is older in life, but this is
Right.
where he gets his true power and discovers his true nature. Um, and that's the interesting thing about when they talk about light. This is the beautiful thing about the Arabic language, is that I can see the author selecting words that, some of which hint more towards physical light, and some of the words for light hint a little bit more towards spiritual enlightenment. We
Uh-huh.
have the same way of using light and light, but it's the same word,
Right.
different words that the author chooses throughout the text to sort of intimate. Incidentally, it's probably important for the audience to know that another common conflation in this Emerald Tablet idea is that the above and the below are the macrocosm and the microcosm. Well, they're just not in this text.
Right.
Original sources of the Emerald Tablet have quite different words for above and below,
Hmm.
and macrocosm and microcosm, and it doesn't try to draw a parallel between them.
It's not
Um,
the same. It's not the same as you would write in Arabic. Those words, right?
yeah, they're
That when,
completely different.
right.
It's exactly as different as we said in English: above, below, macrocosm, microcosm. There in Arabic, it's the above, the below, and then the words for macrocosm and microcosm in Arabic are essentially, if you were to say it in English, it would be the greater world and the lesser world, or the smaller
Ah,
world.
okay.
And that's how it's understood. You
Yeah. So,
know.
So there's no confusing the two, and it's not like you're throwing those in there as like a
Right, right.
conflating the term at all. It's specific
Yeah.
to what that is, right?
And, and I think the reason this became such a cornerstone of Western thought, that this Emerald Tablet, is that it's 15 lines. I mean, that's
Hmm.
fairly succinct. It's beautifully written. It's got
It
a
is.
great balance to it. The sentences are fairly well balanced in most of the versions. There's lots of versions. There's 40 versions of this manuscript out there. And
But you did
each
the
written,
research. But I'm not. But you did like you went to the oldest source material you could possibly find that exists, right? It was like 823 or something. Somehow in the 800s, right?
yeah,
At the library in England. Am I wrong here? I'm trying to come up with.
yeah. The British National Library has a, I think it's, I don't know, understand the exact relationship, but it's there's a library in, oh gosh, where is it? I want to say it's Lebanon. They have an online library.
Mm,
And so they've digitized a lot of these books. They haven't translated them necessarily.
right.
So we've got a translation from there, the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris.
Hmm. Hmm.
They've got a different manuscript. And then I bought I had it shipped from Belgium. I found a 1979 publication where there exists a German scholarly version of the Secret of Creation and the Art of Nature, that was compiled, yeah, in the late 70s, and
Right.
that's used, but it's never been translated in English.
That's-
So,
but and this I know you and I talk about this too, but the Germans were the first one that created trans the translation book between German and
yeah,
Arabic, right? And that was
they
in the
did the first
1800s, right?
bilingual, right? Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
there was something that sort of passed for an Arabic dictionary in the late Middle Ages, but it was a few thousand words. But the first concise dictionary is the Hans Wehr dictionary.
Mhm.
The Germans did that. The Germans were the first to really take Arabic and systematize. I know
Mhm.
it's very weird that they would systematize something, but systematize
Amazing.
the verb forms so you could actually look them up and have a reference system.
Yeah.
So it was all very organized. But that's what you find is the state of, I mean, even the state of academic research into English was
Hmm.
not that great in the late Middle Ages, early Renaissance, into the early industrial period. I mean, even English spelling hadn't been standardized.
No, not at all. But I mean, it's you went to the length to find the oldest version you could possibly find, and then iterate.
Right.
And then throughout the book, you go through. Okay, here's this. This is how this potentially got mistranslated, and you walk through the whole entire gambit of where it was first seen, where it was first written about, where it was first published, and then how you can kind of work backwards and see where okay, maybe this is how it was mistranslated, and through all the ways you do it analytically, because of how you are, you're awesome, right? So
Yeah, I pre-
you figured out how to explain it and do it in a way. I mean, you taught me things that I didn't realize that there was no punctuation in Arabic. That's amazing, and that it's basically it's written right to left, and it just keeps going, right? It's
yeah.
just going, and you have to know. I mean, you can explain it better than I can, but you have to
Oh,
infer
yeah.
where the punctuation is right throughout the text like
This is where you find the early translators, and we're talking Isaac Newton as well,
right.
kind of guessing where a sentence began and ended
Hmm.
in Arabic, because you're right, they didn't use punctuation until the 1900s. And that's more as they sort of entered into an era where there was a lot more press, newspapers and scientific publications. They need to standardize the language because Arabic isn't, the language Arabic. There's
Right.
all these different dialects of it.
Hmm.
And, the academic community of Arabic speakers, landed on this thing. We call it modern standard Arabic. It's based off Quranic Arabic.
Okay.
But it's a high level language. It's very precise.
Hmm.
And the people like Newton and some of these other translators just didn't have access to that knowledge. But so they would say like, well, it feels like the sentence ends here. So you'll read like maybe the Ruska translation or some of the other ones, and there's like little hyphens or maybe a semicolon and a period here and a comma here. None of that existed in the original. And so that's where for people to realize when they read these things, they're reading an interpretation of what this particular translator thinks it might have, could have, should have said, and some of them just simply inserted verbs that
Which
just
is
weren't
amazing.
there.
You've told me
I
that too.
mean,
Just add a verb, right? like
I went to their sources they were using. and I
Right.
do not see these words. And
Hmm.
it was like, well, I could see where they thought that maybe it probably should be there, but
Hmm.
it isn't. And one of the things that trips translators up is that Arabic doesn't use the verb to be in the present tense. It doesn't write it.
Ah,
So, to verb to be is MR was were be being been. They don't write is. This is. They just say this, and there's just nothing. It's just space, and then they describe the thing. And I saw a lot of the translators, the early translators, just put in some things, and that's
right.
actually critical to sort of this like or as
Hmm.
comparison. And there's no verb there. It's basically it says the above, and then it uses the word min, the below, and the below min, the above. It's not is, and not was. There's no verb like come from, and that min really means from. The
Hmm.
above is from the below, and the below is from the above. There's plenty of great ways in Arabic to say comparison, to make a like or as comparison, and the authors use none of that.
Right.
So it would be a great stretch to think that this is a direct comparison. And think how, I don't know, banal and boring that would be, just to say, well, the deep secret of the Emerald Tablet is one thing is like another thing. It just doesn't, not very, very esoteric sounding.
It doesn't have a good ring to it. We got to get
Yeah,
a
it's just
ring to
not
it.
like, wow, they really buried that in the crypt, and Apollonius had to work his whole life to figure out, like, hey, man,
Oh
you
man,
know,
this is it.
yeah, I got it. This thing is like another thing. That's just not what it's actually, seriously, in its
Yeah.
context. If you read there's a work in the ancient Hermetica called, I'll botch this pronunciation because it's Greek. It's like the Kori
Hmm.
Cosmo, but it's basically the Virgin of the World. It is really this story, and this story in the Emerald Tablet that we call the Emerald Tablet is really the story of the ascent and descent of Hermes Trismegistus, who
Right.
is incidentally isn't called Hermes Trismegistus in the Emerald Tablet, which is not called the Emerald Tablet.
Just blowing everybody's complete worldviews to shit, John.
He's called Hermes Thrice Wise,
Hmm. Hermes Strikes
and
Twice. Yeah.
I think you were I gave a talk in
Yeah.
Louisville. I think you were there, and
Yeah,
someone
it
asked,
was.
"Does that matter? Is isn't wise just like majestic?" I'm like, "Yeah, but it's not the same word.
It's not.
I mean, it doesn't. It's not even the same word in Greek, which is majestos. It's just not. It's just not. It's just not written there. So, like, why don't we start with what's written there and then
Go from there.
start again? And I could be wrong, and I really hope that the next guy or gal comes along, retranslates it, and says Gilbert was wrong. Gilbert missed this thing. Because great, let's start the conversation, but let's not just rely on some of the stuff we've been handed.
Yeah, and that's what that was amazing. I mean, you do a really amazing job throughout the book to go, look, this is where potentially somebody decided to throw a verb in or you know, anything else that could probably connect these two. That hell, this could probably not even be the end of a sentence. This could have been part of another sentence, and you threw a semicolon in or a comma or whatever, and that was copied. And you found this, and you showed it in the book that mistranslation or added whatever they decided to was taken at some point and then just copied and copied
Yeah,
and copied and copied and copied until we got to modern times, right?
sure. And it affects the general culture. If you have several hundred thousand people read it a certain way, let's say you're back in 1924 and you're making a new translation, and you just already know that it says, the above is, the above and below are like each other.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's in your head. Then that's just kind of how your pen is gonna move when you try to translate. You're gonna be like, not like, does it say that? You're gonna be like, how does it say that? So you're gonna find a way to make it say that. And
Right.
I think you can clearly see that in a lot of the translations. And
Definitely up
again,
into
it's
modern
translations
times.
of translations, most of them.
Yeah, but
Most
it's
of them use sources.
but like you said, it went from ancient Arabic to what was it? Greek, I think probably was the next, or it was
It
Egyptian.
was it was probably in Greek before. It was probably in ancient Syriac before. So in
Syriac.
medieval
Okay.
times, you probably have a Proto Syriac or an ancient Syriac, and there's vestiges of Syriac that find their way in form and function into the Emerald Tablet, and
Hmm.
so it's probably a very very old work. I mean, I'm not going to argue with that pedigree. It's quite old.
Right.
Was probably in Greek. They can tell because of some of the word forms.
Hmm.
And then into Arabic, where in the Middle Ages that then became Latin
Right.
and then found its way into other languages. There isn't a really direct English translation that isn't influenced heavily by those. I think Ruska and some of those in the early 1900s, when these sources were rediscovered,
Right.
they were working from some of the sources, but you can still see where they got it kind of wrong. But there were some pretty good translations in the early 1900s.
Oh
I'm
yeah,
not the
definitely.
first guy to say, hey, this didn't say as above, so below.
Right.
They said above is from, and I mentioned that in the book, but I
Mhm.
think we need to re-examine that and really bring that to the forefront. Like, because I mean, someone asked me just the other day, they texted me, someone who studies these things and says, what do you think the ramifications are on the esoteric world and Freemasonry and Rosicrucianism?
Yeah.
I have no idea, man. I haven't even thought about that,
Mm-mm.
Uh, does it have an impact? Maybe it doesn't, maybe this doesn't matter in the grand scale of things, but I think attribution is important. Let's see what it does say. What does it really say? And maybe that's going to open up a whole new thing. You know,
Yeah. Because like you
what
said,
is it?
they particularly chose words to describe things where they had other words at the time that could mean something completely different, right? And they chose those words for a reason. It's very, practical magic and things like that. Words have meanings and sounds, and but
Sure.
it's very specific. You need to keep these things in these orders, and you don't want to accidentally you know summon a cat or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, well, you know what I mean? Like, it's
You don't
very
want to
specific,
slam the door on your own potential knowledge. For example, how many
right?
people have read all of the philosophical Hermetica? It's not all in one book anywhere. People think it's the Corpus Hermeticum. That's a huge portion of it, but there's a lot of other stuff, a lot of other works, and they're disparate. They're all out there. You have to get all those books assembled.
And they're not in English, right? You told me that they're not even all translated into English.
So I think the philosophical Hermetica, most of that is.
Hmm.
Um, but yes, a lot of the what we would call the technical Hermetica. So
The
the
technical
Hermetica
hermetic,
that I didn't really look at too much for this book, but
right?
some people think or would say that the Emerald Tablet is part of the technical Hermetica because in some medieval minds it was an alchemical work.
Right.
If you want to entertain yourself, I think I have one in the book where when they wrote it out like it was an alchemical formula and talk about applying what you want it to say to what it actually says.
It's mind-boggling, isn't it? It's like, what? Oh, you cut out again. Let's see. Come back to me. I can see you, but I can't hear you.
Can you hear me? How about now?
Yep. Now I can hear you.
Got me?
Yep.
Okay. Well, what happens is how many people, how many thousands of people have said, okay, the Emerald Tablet says as above, so below. That's all I need to know. And they never
They
looked farther into it because it's been distilled for them into a soundbite and given to them.
and it's only 13 lines to begin with, and they
Yeah.
take those four words, right?
Yeah.
And then that's it, and it's a piece of green glass, and that's all they know.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, why does it say at the very end, and that is why I am called Hermes thrice wise?
Hmm.
And why is it written in such a way in Arabic that you could also read it Hermes, the triangle of wisdom, which is exactly how that would read if you didn't want to say it thrice wise. It's morphologically the same, and it's exactly morphologically the same in Syriac, ancient Syriac.
Wow. Well, there you
To say
go.
thrice is to say triangle, and to write thrice wise is to literally say a triangle of wisdom.
Whoa.
Very strange. I mean, that's just how it was said, but why not look into this?
That-
Let's have a look.
right, because if you've never known that was the case, why would you even go farther? But now that you do,
Right. Or if you think the above and the below are the macrocosm and the microcosm, but then you read in the actual translation that they're not, well, what is the above and the below? I say read the Virgin of the World and you're going to see it in spades. You'll see it better than I can describe it here,
right?
but it has to do with the transmigration of souls in the Hermetic context. macrocosm and microcosm are considered something different.
Right. Right. It's
So
basically from what I've read in your book, it kind of deals with um the coming and going of souls, the
yeah,
transformation of the
the
two, right?
transmigration, and
Transmigration,
this
yeah.
was in the Virgin of the World and elsewhere in the Hermetica. You know, it's just like most Christians would be familiar with. Christians would know there's a God the Father figure.
Mm-hmm.
Then there is the Word, the Logos. Okay,
Right.
and and then creation is emanated from that,
Right.
right? It's
Right.
spoken into being, which is why Hermes is this Hermetica was such a big deal because it's all about words and the sacredness of words and getting words correct. So I'm a little bit of a stickler on in my book, even though there's some typos, there really are. That means you've gotten the original copy. That's the sign of authenticity if you get my typos. But
Mine says first edition. I'm keeping it. I don't care. I
hey,
want
that's
them
the
all.
way to do it. That's the way to do it. But you find in there that there's a system that Hermes himself is. Are you still there? You
Yeah,
froze up.
I'm here.
Oh,
You froze too, but I can hear you.
okay. We'll wait for it to come back on. I'll carry on my sentence.
Yeah. No, it's
Come on, video.
mm,
This is like acting. We can make this work.
yeah. Yeah.
There we are.
There it is. There it is.
Back.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
So you see that God charges Hermes to create this system to bring souls from the below to the above. This is the cycle by which souls are being educated in this material world and how they're trying to elevate and try to reintegrate back to the divine state from whence they came, or whence they came. Whence
Mhm.
already means from where, but
Mhm.
it's a standard. There's a fallen. The humanity is a fallen thing. We fell out of grace,
Mhm.
and Hermes at least is throwing them a rope here, saying,
Right.
well, they can recoup themselves, but that's not the same as the macrocosm and the microcosm.
No, which
It's
is amazing. The parallels between Christianity and basically any of the Abrahamic religions are amazing if you read any of the
you
Hermetica,
know
right?
they're all a lot of them are talking about Platonic ideas of like logos.
Mm-hmm.
In the Book of John, it starts by saying that starts talking about the word, and in it's translated from logos
Mm-hmm.
or logos, depends on how you say it. I don't know if I'm saying it right. This was a big idea in that time frame in the Middle East and the Mediterranean region. This was just a hotbed of ideas were competing.
Mm-hmm.
There was not one Christianity, there were several Christianities when
Right.
Christianity started. They were competing. How do we define the logos? Who is the Father? What is there a demiurge? We don't know. Is it
Right.
gnosis? Is it what you know? Is it the experience of the divine, or is it belief? Is it a faith?
Mm-hmm.
And there was that battle going on. And you'll find that Hermeticism, the philosophical Hermeticism of the day, was quite Gnostic. It was about the experience of the divine and not about onboarding a certain set of beliefs. That's just how that was. But there all these ideas were happening at the time. The Bible wasn't written in a vacuum. Let's put it that way.
You got that right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's such a fascinating time. I encourage everyone to go look into these things.
Yeah.
Go get your hands on as much Hermetica as possible.
Yeah.
Ancient Hermetica.
Right.
Look, the Kabbalion and Thoth the Atlantean, or the Emerald Tablets of Thoth the Atlantean, really beautifully written books, but they're what I would charitably call received wisdom, that are
Mm-hmm.
very, very modern works based off older works.
Yep.
If they give themselves a pedigree saying that they come from some ancient source, I would question that,
Right.
because they just simply didn't exist till the 1900s when people were really interested in these things. And you could see some fairly modern ideas. You start talking about vibrations and harmonics and things like that. These aren't things that people spoke about in third century BC.
No, no, but you're right. They are heavily influenced by the earlier works, but yeah, they purport to be older than they are. And not to say they're not beautiful, but
Yeah,
they are.
look, they're
Yeah.
beautifully written. And
Yeah.
if they're a gateway to curiosity, then great.
Yeah.
I'm all for it. But I say be skeptical of what you read. Don't go thinking that, there's a spaceship buried, by the Sphinx. Like
Damn
one of the
it.
books says, I can't remember which one it was, the Kabbalion thing, I can't remember.
Damn it. Yeah, I don't
Yeah,
know.
you want that to be true, but it's probably not.
Yeah, I really want it to be true that the Library of Alexandria didn't get burned and that it's in the basement of the Vatican.
I know that I heard somewhere, maybe you told me that there 1% of ancient works have survived from antiquity. And I believe it. I mean,
Yeah,
there's so much lost. So you can't have, not only can you not have a perfect translation or a perfect interpretation, you can't have a perfect concept of the context. You just we can get really close. That's why we can't be too literal
right.
about like, well, the Corpus Hermetica says that the soul is this and the nous is this. It's like, yeah, but it also contradicts itself later. And yeah, there's hundreds of years of writing. There's gobs of it that's lost. There's probably so much context lost that it is very hard. And the best we can do is to try to piece it together from the sources.
Yeah, definitely. And then, like you said, then you kind of how it resonates with you though too, right? Like, how do you put your knowing or your own gnosis into the text, right? In a way that makes sense for you. And I think that's maybe what people kind of did with the Kabbalion and things
Right.
like that, right? They
Oh,
kind of like,
right,
well,
right, right.
this is kind of how I feel it should, resonates with me, and maybe that's how it,
And look, it's an
comes out.
evolution. Let's call it, I think someone had even said that there's, I can't remember what author said it, but they called the ancient Hermeticism, they called it Hermetism, and they called the modern sort of after new thought came around, or the new way of thinking, sort of modern magical thinking, they called that Hermeticism,
Ah,
like an ism
of
of
the
Hermetism,
it's what the
Hermetism,
tism.
Hermeticism. I think we just have to keep that in mind that there are modern innovations, and call it an evolution of hermetic thought. That's great. Let it keep going. I'm not against any of that, and I'm not for throwing out the idea of an as above, so below.
Mhm.
Just want to say that don't think if you know that idea that you know the philosophical hermetica, the
Right.
religio philosophical hermetica, because it's way more vast than that.
It's amazing, yeah. And then treat it as a gateway. In my mind, I'm thinking, if you're curious about it and you believe that that's what it was forever, and you're curious about it, read your book. I mean, get an idea of how it could be something different, and then go from there. Get into the other materials that are compendium, that kind of
Yeah.
in wrap this 13 lines of text that everybody likes to quote. And
Yeah, and I would say use that, and and hopefully I can have a translation of the Secret of Creation out, which I'm seeking a grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities to give me a summer stipend
yeah,
to really get a good chunk of that work. But I wouldn't expect that to be done for a year or two minimum. It's a large work. It's not just a matter of reading the Arabic and writing it out. I mean, some of it's very difficult. But like you said about a gateway, like the
yeah.
first book that really spoke to me that was a gateway to all of this was the Bhagavad Gita. The
Hmm.
sort of seminal central work of Hinduism, and some people would probably say Buddhism and Zen Buddhism.
Right.
Um, I mean, that was the first book that really spoke to me. I was in my 20s, just a young guy, and I'd always been interested in various things, and I had read things like Franz Barden and
Hmm.
all these dudes. Um, and then I read that, and it was like I was like, yes, 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 that's the stuff right there.
Yeah.
I've only recently read something comparable, and now it's been all these years, 30 some years, or however old I am now.
Yeah.
Uh, Probably 30 years later, I read Yaka Burma's The
Mm.
Supersensual Life, which you can find online for free.
Oh wow.
Blows my mind. Blows my mind how similar, almost word for word, he's saying things there in the Bhagavad Gita, but he was writing in the early 1600s, which is about 150 years before any Western language translation of the Bhagavad Gita had been written, which was
Wow.
the late 1780s somewhere.
Wow.
And he was nailing it. It's just like Meister Eckhart. If
Uh-huh.
you're a fan of
Yeah.
Eckhart,
Yeah.
who was what, 12th century, so 1100s, I think,
Right.
discovered Zen.
Hmm. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
in a Christian context,
Hmm.
as a priest,
Hmm.
he discovered it and could speak fluently on it. And I'm just blown away how these things just keep reverberating through the ages, and they keep being rediscovered. I think Huxley called it the perennial philosophy, or talked about it. I don't know if he coined the phrase, but
Yeah, and I think it probably, personally, I think it maybe has to do with something with collective consciousness. I mean, the collective consciousness of humanity at the time. I mean, it probably permeates, right? And so you have this kind of idea, this feeling, and this work that does ring true. And if it resonates with a lot of people, it just kind of it stays. Or maybe that guy just got reincarnated.
well, yeah. Even think of it this way: there's one reality, and
Right.
so you're looking at reality with scientific method, which I'm a fan of. But
Hmm.
uh, you know, yeah, like Hawking said, that there's, and I happen to agree with it. There might be the scientific method might need a little bit more work because it doesn't take into consideration what it is to know, to
Uh-huh.
receive the knowledge from the observation. There might be a part of the equation lacking or missing. People are working on that. It's really fascinating stuff.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that's, if you look at stuff with, say, a scientific method or any method, and you arrive at some conclusions, and then you find out that some of them are eerily similar to ancient Egyptian conclusions.
Hmm.
I don't find that very surprising, because if you think of Egypt, even ancient Egypt was ancient during ancient times. It was so ancient that they forgot where it came from. If you asked ancient Egyptians, they didn't know where their own country started.
Right.
And if you take a priestly class,
So the priestly class is a big deal.
okay, so the priestly class um, is, if you take several thousand years, several thousand people every year who all they do is sit in temples and think about reality, that is a massive parallel processing of the wet computer between our ears that's going on. They're observing the same observable universe and the same nature that a scientist is observing. You bet they're going to hit upon some of the same calculations, and some of them eerily similar. Is my hypothesis I set forth. I think you can massively parallel process throughout the ages, having
Hmm.
written language and people dedicated to thinking, that you can apply machines to, or mathematics to.
AI.
I think you come up with similar ideas, at
Hmm.
least some sort of congruency or overlap to them. Not
Right.
necessarily exactly the same, but this is the Rosicrucian idea, right? That there shouldn't be a disharmony between science and religion,
Right.
you
Right.
know,
And
that
nature.
they should be reconciled because they're observing the same observable universe.
Right. And
So
the tie into the UFO thing is that it seemed like throughout all of humanity, that man decided to basically center themselves around the priestly class, right? The priestly class was always there in all societies and all over the planet. You got the shaman, you have the, you know, Egyptians, you have everything. And they kind of, man kind of looks up to this class, to this priestly class. And in that, um, the tie to ufology is always like, well, was that on purpose? Is that something that was, put there by somebody non-human? Is there a non-human intelligence that's involved in communication with the priestly class, or does the priestly class have some type of better connection to a non-human intelligence that then filters down to the rest of humanity in a way that um, you know helps bring
that's
about
an
different
interesting question. And I haven't given a lot of thought about UFOs, except that that's the only way I'll go back to work for the military or the government. If they say, we need you to come work on UFOs, I'm there. I want to work on the aliens. I want to do it. But let me offer this, is
Yeah,
that I think the Rosicrucian answer to that,
yeah,
and probably the Western mystical answer to that, not that I speak for all of that, just from my point of view, is
yeah.
that the priestly class may have discovered that maybe they contain the non-human origin. The
Mm,
soul in all of these traditions, to include Christianity,
mhm.
comes from somewhere else.
Right.
That we may be much larger, much bigger beings, much more grand than we think we are. And I think that's probably at the core of a lot of these thoughts, of these ideas. That the priestly class might be the class that recognizes it. Not that they possess anything that other people do not.
Right.
but to identify with it and to know it. And that might be the perfected self of Apollonius.
Right. To understand, to know that, and then have it be charged to share that, to somehow pass that knowledge down, or to share that wisdom, right? To
Yeah,
make
and
it be known.
that's if anyone reads any of the three founding documents of Rosicrucianism,
Hmm.
that's the idea. And
Right.
not only that, use it to
And
heal society. I mean, it is a bit Lutheran utopianism, the original documents a bit.
a bit, yeah.
They have an anti-Catholic flavor to them, to say the least.
Everything that wasn't Catholic had an anti-Catholic flavor to
Yeah,
it.
there were some upset people at the time.
Yeah, you got to remember though, if it wasn't stamped by the church, it was anti-Catholic, right? It was just like,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
was
and
it.
it was but the original, the Famas,
Yeah,
they they
Confessio, that,
really
yeah,
spoke on reaching this superhuman potential, this not I would call it a non-human potential,
right.
and then communicating that back to the people who do not have that
For free. It was the other part, that
for
gratis, right?
free, right?
That
Not to
was the thing.
charge.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I think it's a grand idea. I mean, I'm not a utopian myself, but I think that to have that idea is not a bad thing.
and to strive for it. I mean, being a Rosicrucian, that makes me feel like at least I could do something to help in some way. Just that's how I always felt about it. Like, hey, how do I make this better, or how do I
You've
make
got to
this thing?
embrace your non-human side,
Yeah,
just
it's
just
there.
like just like the Incredible Hulk. You got to embrace the non-human side and go with it. But that's
Yeah,
the idea. There's
yeah.
more than meets the eye, you
Hmm.
know. Now, does that preclude the existence of aliens and UFOs? No, it doesn't. I wouldn't be able to speak on that myself. I've never had an experience like that. I have friends who have,
Yeah,
who told me that they've seen craft.
right.
I don't think anyone's told me they've seen beings before, but
No, but
something I
craft.
can't speak on. I have no nothing. I have no experience in that.
But anybody can, pretty much. I mean, I think we talked about this too. I mean, I got, our guys, it was, 12 of us or 13 of us or something. We were in the middle of nowhere down in Hocking Hills, and we all got together and we just sat together, held hands for a really long time for guys, 13 guys to hold hands for 20 minutes in a field. But we all listened to some, binaural beats kind of thing, different frequencies. And we just kind of like, I told everybody, like, just mentally project where we're at now up into as far as you can into outer space, like Google Maps, just drilling down to where we're at, like, the Earth's turning and we're here, and just project love and that we just want a sign and that we're here. And everybody was cool with me, and they did it. We did it. And then like 25, 30 minutes later, orange balls just pop out of the sky. Boom, boom.
Oh,
And I have
that's
like,
amazing.
and I have this night vision camera, like this little psionics thing, this little, color night vision. And I'm like, film the whole thing. Right.
That's
And,
fantastic.
and like, it was there for so long. This is weird, and it's like one of these things that happens in UFO lore anyway, that everybody's just like, well, why'd you stop filming, or why'd you leave? It's just like, I just got bored, and I got tired, and I went to bed. And like, what the hell? It's the most amazing thing ever. Everybody's like, yeah, I just went to bed. I'm like, what? So like half of everybody, like most everybody, just went to bed. I'm like, what the fuck are you guys doing? They're like, I'm just gonna go to bed after like 20 minutes. I'm like,
That's brilliant.
and so then we did it the next night. Like, surely this can't happen again, right? Now, and it happened again, like the next night, right? Film the same thing, and it's like same
Sure.
thing. Me and except for two other guys are hanging out, and everybody's like, "All right, I'm going to bed." I'm like, "There's a fucking orange ball right above our head." Ah, it's cool.
Cool. Well,
That's cool.
I've
Man.
seen it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I just started
Well,
handing the camera around it because I'm like, okay, look, I'm not the only one looking at this, and everybody's like, "Oh yeah, yeah." It's just, but like we did that, and it was just like consciously like projecting that down, and I feel like somehow it answered. That came down, and it kind of interacted with us. Other people have done it all over. They call it different things. Human initiated contact is the new catchphrase. HIC,
oh, I've never heard that
HIC.
one yet.
Yeah, HIC, HICE, or CE5 is what Dr. Stephen Greer came up with years ago, like, which is, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, which is basically
Right.
interactive. But, it works, especially when you're there and you kind of believe it, and there's a couple of guys that are completely skeptical. Like, I'm skeptic, but I'm going to give it a try. I just,
Yeah, let's do
yeah,
it.
well, let's
Skeptic
do
but
it.
curious. Best way.
Yeah, yeah. So we did that. I mean, and anybody can do that, which is really cool. And that's kind of what's being pushed right now. One of the newest whistleblowers out now is a Air Force guy, and I guess he's part of this thing that where they have some people do that and they bring these crafts in and then interact with them and things like that, or actually pilot these things. And I don't
It's
know. I haven't got into it deep enough yet. I don't know if it's a bunch of bullshit because the government really likes to give us all that a lot of the
well,
time.
yeah. Give you
So
something to think about. But
yeah,
look, what you're describing shouldn't be surprising. It shouldn't be discounted out of hand. If you're talking about, well, let's tie it back in with Hermeticism or Hermetism, the ancient Hermeticism, the science of the soul.
back to hermit. It's not hermetism, is it? It's not
It could be Hermetism.
hermetism. It sounds
Take it
like
back.
a guy in a cave, but okay.
Yeah, I mean that's I guess where it came from.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
idea of hermetics,
yeah.
if you're talking the science of the soul, shouldn't that be all the souls? If you're
Hmm.
talking about the creation of the universe, it shouldn't that be all the universe?
Right.
And it stands to reason that if there are, say, beings who could visit us, of course they would be more advanced. They would have to be more intellectually advanced, technologically. But why wouldn't they be plugged into the same system, the same network? If you can, do remote viewing, which there's good hard evidence for,
Right.
and I've seen. Oh, he froze up again.
You froze up too. That's because we're getting to the good stuff. Every time
That's
I
we're getting
say
to the good stuff, and the government's shutting us down,
just
man.
fucking God, they're on me all the time, man. I
Yeah,
like they know.
NSA's pushing the button.
Yeah, they're just thinking, just throttle this shit for him just a little
I
bit
worked
more.
for the government before, and I'll tell you, we don't have the resources to do the shit we're supposed to do. It's
Well,
hard to do crap with a Windows 98, I'm telling you.
we got Windows 98. We're trying to get this
We
thing out the ground.
we could talk about that at some point too. But okay,
Oh
I
yeah,
think back.
yeah,
What were we
yeah.
talking about? Oh,
Oh
so taking it back to Hermeticism or
yeah,
Hermetism, it stands to reason that that these beings would be, if there are other beings, if there are aliens, which there should be statistically,
yeah.
would be part of the same
Consciousness, right?
system of creation that we're part of. And if you've seen, like I've seen, a really good hard evidence of remote viewing,
Right.
things like that,
Hmm.
uh, which I've seen firsthand as a skeptic, and I've been like, well, that was real. Then it stands to reason that we should be able to interact with them on that same plane. If they're part of the same creation and under the same deity, if you will,
Hmm.
and have a soul, if that's how you choose to view things, then we should be able to interact with them magically,
Right. Right.
ritualistically, which is what you did on what you described there. That was a ritual,
Right. Yeah. I
like
mean,
summoning anything.
exactly. Yeah. And everybody says to be careful about that too. And everybody's like, well, you don't know exactly what you're bringing in and what you're doing. And it's like, yeah, I get that too.
100%.
Yeah. But that's something to deal with. But the remote viewing thing is, I've done it. I took like Ed May's class, like the online class, and, like the whole thing, and did it
Oh, cool.
myself and was blown away. And my stepdaughter, it was during COVID and she was, home and, I was like, all right, let's just do this. I got her, she's probably like, I don't know, at the time, probably I don't know, 12, maybe, 12, like 11, 12, and 13. She was like, no, I don't want to. Okay, whatever. And I'm like, all right, cool. You don't believe it. That's fine. Let's do it together. So we did the whole thing. And she was just knocking it out. Like, oh my God, like nailing every single one of it. And then she was like, whatever. Like, I still want to do it. Right. I'm like, cool. And like, I try and I've done it a little bit, but it's there and it's amazing. I mean, have you
It is.
tried it? Have you done it? I mean, like
Yeah, I have a long history of weird stuff that's happened to me, and some
it,
things I forgot about that I've only recently remembered in the last few years. But when
oh,
I was younger, I remember having my first out of body experience when I was probably 3,
wow.
and I didn't know it was abnormal. I mean, there'd be no reason for me to make it up because
Right.
I had no one to make it up to. Like none of that made any sense to me anyway. I didn't,
Yeah.
it just wasn't like trying to be sensational. I remember coming into a room and I expected my brother to be in there, and he wasn't. And there was sort of a shock to that. There was a sort of I guess it's called amygdala hijacking now. It's
Hmm.
a way to start. You can start hypnosis that way, but it's sort of a sudden shock because I remember putting my hands on this bed, like slapping my hands on this mattress to look over this bed because I was a little kid. I had to
Right.
look over, and I was in this room alone, and it shocked me. And before you know it, I was above myself in the corner of the room, looking down on myself with my hands on the bed.
Wow.
I had the presence of mind, if you want to call it mind, to look over the other side of the bed where, just in case he was hiding out, while hovering there. That it didn't seem weird because I was all new at life anyway. I didn't, I
Right.
mean, I thought maybe that's what we do. I didn't know. Like riding on a tricycle was new.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Everything was
Yeah.
new then. Things like
Wow.
that throughout my whole life. But and I think we mentioned this
Hmm.
before that this came back to something I remembered a few years ago that I'd forgotten about.
Hmm.
Not like a buried memory, like it was traumatic. It was just I forgot about it. So I
Yeah.
had a near-death experience when I was 3. It would have been right before that out-of-body experience.
Whoa.
Um, back to the tricycle. I wrecked a tricycle so hard. This is how accident prone I was. I catapulted my face onto the sidewalk. I hit so hard I could feel my face go in a little bit.
Ugh.
And I started bleeding from the back of my sinuses where you couldn't put pressure on it. And I bled completely out on the way to the hospital. And
Ah.
I didn't know anything. I didn't know what blood was even. I just thought I was in trouble.
Hmm.
I thought people were upset because I did something wrong. I didn't know I was dying or anything, but there was something rather than nothing, you
Hmm.
know,
Hmm.
and, it was a very strange experience to say the least. There was something there. There
Hmm.
was an entity. I called it the golden bug. I didn't know what else to call it. I mean, what's your vocabulary at 3? But I
Yeah.
remember talking to my parents about it and asking, like, did you see that too? And they didn't know what the hell I was talking about. And I
Wow.
remember their conversations about it. And eventually, it just got forgotten because I couldn't communicate it. No one understood it. But that was where I really first started feeling kind of estranged, kind of like the first time I ever felt separation from other people
Mm.
and that maybe something was amiss. Also, it was like waking up into that experience and
Wow.
getting back to normal life has always felt a little bit like being asleep, and it's a little bit frustrating.
That's amazing.
Very strange. So I mean, yeah, I don't worry about the post-death thing. I mean, at least in my experience, there's something rather than nothing.
Right. Well,
Is
I mean, I mean, it's amazing. I think we talked about this too, that there's a massive correlation between near-death experiences and UFO experiencers. Um,
really?
yeah, it's
Yeah,
amazing.
I mean, that makes sense though.
Yeah, it's not really. I mean, we talked about this from Dr. Jeffrey Long and I spoke, and I think you watched that podcast where we talked, Dr.
Oh
Long
yeah.
too, and then he does. I don't think he has it. I think he may have it now on his newer surveys, but I've only found out about it in the past like 4 or 5 years from people that actually are experiencers that are into the UFO thing and that have still continuing ongoing UFO experiences, communication and things like that. Is that when they had their near death experiences where they're clinically dead, things like that, things, car accident, I'm dead, I'm on, heart attack, whatever. And then I come back and then they have this deeper connection to consciousness and to the UFO thing. We're like, okay, I need to go outside. Something's going to be there. And then there's a craft, or
Mhm.
there's something like that. Right. Or these, entities and things like that. And
Yeah.
it's this correlation that really happens. It's like,
More sensitive to the weird stuff. I always call it the
yeah,
weird.
yeah. Oh yeah. No, yeah, totally. And which is, I probably have, and I don't remember to, but I've probably died a million times. I don't have the cognitive recall of that. But when I went through the mystery school stuff, like Freemasonry, the Rosicrucians, things like that, and then through those rituals, I'm not sharing, spilling secrets here, but would you go through the mock death, at some point, and even the Egyptian mystery schools somehow it for me kind of reinvigorated that as well, right? It's like another one of those things where I feel
Yeah.
closer to God or closer to spirit, and at the same time open to all these other things that could happen, and other things have happened. So
Ritual's a wild thing, isn't it?
it
I mean,
is.
it can really train your mind in ways that cannot be said in words, and that's what's hard to understand. It's like training for ineffability.
Yeah.
A really well done ritual is like that. And as I got into it, as I got older,
Hmm.
having had that experience, I didn't realize that propelled me sort of down that path. And I always, like I said, when I was younger, I dabbled with, tarot cards. I sort
Right.
of intuitively knew there was some structure behind them, but I didn't, it was pre-internet.
Right.
I didn't
Yeah.
have access to, I couldn't just Google what's the structure behind tarot cards and then just get like Kabbalah. I had no idea what any of that was. Like you
Yeah.
had to
Yeah.
know a guy who knew a book
Yeah.
and then talk to the librarian and they're like, no, I'm not getting that for you because you're too young, and As I got into Franz Barden's initiation into Hermetics, I was a teenager and, joined some groups, started some groups,
Hmm. Hmm.
just everything I possibly could. And then had some strange experiences that, I just couldn't explain and couldn't talk to most people about. And then I got into Freemasonry, and I think most Freemasons find this in the regular lodges, the blue
Hmm.
lodges.
Yeah.
About half the people I really don't want to talk to you about that stuff because
Right.
that's just not what they're there for. It's not what Freemasonry is to them, and that's fine. I'm not gonna be
It's
critical
fine.
of them.
I
But then
agree.
about half of them lean in when you start talking the weird stuff, and
Yeah.
they have questions for you because they have some weird stuff too.
Hmm.
And those are my favorite peeps. And I drive 2.5 hours to a lodge just so I can be around those folks right now.
That's
That's my
amazing.
my lodge is 2.5 hours away from my house.
Wow, man. That's some dedication. And no, I get it though.
Yeah.
That's we talked about this, and that's what I wanted Freemason to be. When I was there, I was like, yeah. And you do have a couple of those guys that lean in, and then and a couple of them don't. They lean back, but
I
that's all
tell
right
you,
too.
the lodge I was raised in was a pretty typical.
Mhm.
You
Blue Lodge,
know,
yeah,
it was, chili dinners and things like that and good fellowship and all that.
yeah,
But I felt called to be in the lodge and as a Freemason, but still didn't know what it was.
right, right.
It was after I was raised and I was sitting in the lodge room by myself and this guy came in, one of the older guys,
Mhm.
and he said, have you read, well, let me pull a book off the shelf here.
Yeah.
Um, have you read Wilmshurst? I'm like, I haven't even heard of Wilmshurst.
Hmm.
Walter Leslie Wilmshurst, I think is his
Hmm.
full name.
Hmm.
Yeah. And he wrote The Meaning of Masonry. And he
Hmm.
said, you need to look online. This was back in 2005. So the internet was good.
Yeah,
I looked
you
it
could do
up
that.
and it was about a deeper meaning to the lodge and a deeper meaning to the lodge symbols and what it meant.
Hmm.
So there was someone there who knew what I was after. And so
Right.
I wrote this book. Here I am plugging a book.
Yeah.
Temple of the Masonic Order. I took Wilmshurst's Meaning of Masonry and put it in a more modern language
Oh, rad.
because I've heard from a lot of new Masons who tried to read Wilmshurst that it's like getting hit over the head with a brick. Oh, you froze again.
You're back. You're back. Yeah, because what is it?
Oh,
18? Was it 18 or not 18? Was it? When did he actually
it
write it?
was.
Was
I can't remember when he actually wrote his, but yeah, it was a while ago. Yeah,
yeah.
late early 1900s. But the
Yeah.
language was so elevated, and our language has evolved. It was also in British
Mm,
academic language, and it was so hard to read.
right.
And so I said, trying to stay true to his ideas, not changing his ideas, tried to organize it, but because it was just 5 papers stuck together and called it a
Oh,
book. So it
okay.
kept starting and stopping in the same places. So I tried to
Mhm.
organize it, tried to put it in modern American English so it's a little bit easier to read. Um,
Now I need to buy that book, John.
yeah, everyone needs to. Everyone in the world.
You're making threes of dollars every copy.
I have, yeah, made scores of dollars in this. But that's not what it's about. It's about getting the
No,
message out, getting a message across and having some fun doing it. I enjoy writing. I'm driven to do it.
that's amazing. And it's still amazing to me that you have like full form books or full form paragraphs or chapters that come to you. And it happens in the shower, just like it happens to me in the shower, where literally things come to me and I'm just like, I'm just trying to wash my back.
It's
Like,
it's
I'm just-
weird, and I think that's a gift. I mean, I really have to say it's a gift.
yeah.
Taking credit for the work of writing. I mean, that's just sitting out at the keyboard, but the work is already there. The words are there.
Right.
The ideas come from somewhere,
Mhm.
and I'm just the guy who writes them down. And I hope it continues. I hope we continue to do that.
Oh man, I'm sure it will. I'm sure. I mean, this book is awesome, man. And, like, I got to get into the other books I haven't yet. I mean, I got to finish my book at some point.
Appreciate it. Well, the only exception to what I just said is this translation I'm working on,
Yes,
the creation of the art of nature. That's just a lot of work.
but I mean, like for your overall concept of it, I mean, and you've kind of, not to summarize it or surmise it, but that's a amazing body of work, right? I mean, that's not just something to sneeze at. That's
Yeah.
an amazing and
It's
nobody's ever.
shocking. It's not in English.
Yeah.
There's parts of it. There's chunks of it. There's a guy online. I can't remember his name right now. He's done a really good job at translating it from the Latin. So an
Hmm.
earlier Latin translation. He's starting to put that into English.
Hmm.
But there is no direct translation from the Arabic to the English. of this.
Wow.
And this seems like it would be a super important work. And it turns out there's a whole ton of stuff out there like that.
It's amazing. Was it so what it was originally was it translated to German? Is that what it was at one point or no?
That one, no, it
No?
was a German academic
That's what it was. You told me.
had access to the same manuscripts that I have now online, but this is before the internet, so she had to physically go
Go.
there and
Hmm.
get these things, and she reviewed, I think, 4 or 5 of the 40 extant manuscripts,
Wow.
and then wrote a really well written academic version, but it's still Arabic, you know. But she was a German scholar.
Wow. So it's still her German scholarly thinking I should put a period here and a comma. Whatever.
Yeah, yes,
Hmm.
yes, but really well done, you know. So I haven't found anything in there that's like crazy, like because
Right.
it's basically a transcription
Ah,
into better handwriting.
got it. Okay. Okay. So
Was, you know,
yeah, so it was just wasn't a translation per se. It was
not
just
a
a
translation or interpretation.
transcription.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I think, well, that's very commendable, and that was used in Middle Eastern studies.
Wow.
So I don't think anyone thought, just no one's really thought like, hey, we need to translate that into English from its original sources. I mean, I think it's a new movement that really, I mean, the 1920s in
Hmm.
America is where you really start seeing this sort of idea start, the sort of modern esoteric thought
Right.
come up. That hasn't been that long.
No, it really hasn't. It's amazing that and most of the texts don't even exist anymore, right? I mean, even the ones from the 20s and the teens and a lot of that stuff doesn't
Your
isn't
hands
around.
on.
Yeah.
Yeah, good luck. It's hard. Like I say to esoteric students or students of Western esotericism, go ahead and try to find the technical Hermetica. Go ahead. There's the Picatrix, right? I dare you to go try to find all that. We know the Imaginibus, uh, the Picatrix. Those are the big ones.
Hmm.
There are a whole bunch listed. If you try to scour the sources, and there's only about half of them you can find. Some of them don't exist anymore. Some of them are probably in private libraries. You hear mention of their title, but you can't find them. A lot of them, I can't even find where they might be. And I have
Wow.
looked and looked and looked and looked and looked. Um,
Why would people
why
hoard that
is
shit?
that?
Why would they hoard that?
I think there's value, and I bet there are
Mm.
people who have that in private libraries. Either it's been forgotten, like a
Mm.
lot of things. You'll have someone in the 1900s said, "This is the most important book. I'm gonna squirrel it away in my library, and me and my secret occult buddies are going to use it." And then they pass away. Who knows what happened to it? Could
It's
still
like
be sitting there. Could be
sold at
gone.
some garage sale somewhere and it's sitting
Oh,
in
the
a
garage sale.
yeah.
Yeah, that's how Masonic works get out. They're like, "Oh, I gotta keep it all secret." It's like, well, as soon as Grandpa dies, all his stuff goes to Goodwill,
Yeah.
and that's where it is.
It's
I don't know.
terrible, man. It's
Are you
terrible.
still seeing me?
Yeah, I see you. You're frozen, but I can hear you. I don't know if you can hear
Oh,
me. Yeah,
yeah.
I was at a book sale last week or the week. I was probably last week, and it was weird, man. It was like people ran in there with like big folding carts like that unfold, and they're like ran in there, and they were like all resellers, right? And they're just grabbing shit to sell,
Wow.
and I get to like the religious section. And there's a guy who just grabs this Masonic Bible and throws it in his cart. And I'm like,
Oh,
hey, I'm like, dude, what's up? He's like, oh, those big Bibles sell really well. And I'm like, that's a Masonic Bible. And he's like, yeah, the big ones. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's like some guys. And I go, I'm a Mason. He's like, oh, I've heard stories about you guys. And I'm like, all right, cool, dude. Good luck with
yeah.
that. I'm gonna walk. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
So yeah, it's weird to see all that stuff out there.
yeah,
But yeah, a lot of this has been lost. A lot of the ancient works have been lost. So I think we have to be careful with what we do have,
yeah.
and careful with how zealous we are about the interpretations we come across. And when I was an intelligence analyst in the Army, one of the first things I did was realize we have a bias. You can't be unbiased. If you're unbiased, you don't have a point of view.
Mm,
So, you hire analysts because they have a point of view. You want them to be biased, weirdly,
mm,
but you have to control your bias. You have to control for your bias, and you do that with some sort of structured analytical technique. And
mm,
one of the first things that I do is recognize when I agree with something a lot. That's when I start getting more skeptical.
hmm.
So read, say, an interpretation or a translation of the Emerald Tablet, and by golly, it sounds exactly like the thing you want to hear. Question it. Same with
Aha.
any occult reference or any of these books. I mean, there's a lot of great stuff out there, but like I said, there's books that spoke to me, really did.
Mhm.
But I questioned them too, and I looked into them a lot farther.
Yeah.
Some long held beliefs and long held ideas went away.
Yeah.
So
Well, that's good that you were able to let go of the things that you knew weren't
yeah,
serving you, things like that.
yeah, throw them overboard. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
that's just the way. And remember, everything's a model. When you
Hmm.
have a system, let's say you're a hermetist or a hermeticist, and everyone's got their own different model. I have my own model of how I think the hypostasis works, how the universe is constructed.
Hmm.
Um, it's just a model, and you need to be able to change it when you get new information.
That's the hardest part for people, though. You
In it
know,
though,
it is. It really is to be able to throw away their beliefs when they're presented with new information,
right?
especially
And
in the occult or on the esoteric side or like ufology, things like that too. Like when you're presenting, like I really want to believe that these are aliens from Alpha Centauri, and it's like, well, maybe they're not. Well, I just really, and when you're presented with new information, you can't get out of that paradigm where you just keep
it's
doing it.
it's that's I think I've probably offended one or two people with my book, which is fine. That's okay.
Hmm.
That's because I could be wrong
Yeah.
or only partly right. Let's put it that way. I mean, I have a way of looking at it based on a certain method with my background and my limited abilities. Someone else could come along and say, I don't think you're right, and they're more than welcome to write that book,
Yeah.
you know. But
Well,
then
the
cite my book and then send me.
Well, I think it would be good to somebody to go is, oh shit, you're right, and then like take the research farther, right? That's where what we really want is like, okay, let's take this to the next level too, right?
That's the
Ooh,
point. I mean, this is moving a lot of this more towards academia. Someone
right.
texted me today and they were asking about another author who I hadn't read or looked
Mm,
at, who's done some podcasts. I was like, hey, what do you think of his stuff? People say he's putting out a lot of misinformation about the Emerald Tablet, and I'm like, I don't know if you can put out misinformation. A lot of it, I mean, most of it's in the realm of opinion.
mhm.
I have an opinion that we should look at the Arabic sources because those are the sources we have that are the oldest, and then do our best translation off of that, based off of the classical Hermetica that's around it.
Right.
That might not be the way to go. It might not be the most useful way to go. This other author might have just a different way to look at it and say it needs to be modernized. We need a modern look, like we were talking about
Mm,
the other two books, the Kabbalion and Thought the Atlantean.
right.
Maybe that's what it needs. I don't know. I mean, it's possible.
Well,
It's just not. It's not the path I'm going down, but that could be a path for people. That's fine.
I think we're both analysts, and I think that's probably the I would go down as well with you. Like I would just this is the logical, analytical way to go about this, right? This you
Makes
take the
sense.
oldest text, you do the best translation you can do, you do it for what it is, you infer it from the other bodies of work that are surrounding it, and you present it as this is what it says, this is what I feel like that it might be part of with all the surrounding evidence, and there it is. It's up for interpretation at that point.
Yeah. Give. I mean, and then coming from ancient languages, it's hard to say I'm right.
Right.
Arabic is very poetic. I think I mentioned this at the speech you were at. Oh,
Yeah.
all right. Well, I was saying back at in Louisville when you came to that one talk, I was talking about how poetic, for example, Arabic is. So it's a little bit hard to derive exact meaning because
Hmm.
there isn't a one-to-one match with English necessarily. So, for example, the word qalb, which is heart, um, which is basically QLB, to simplify it. If I just pronounce it qalb instead of qalb altogether, it means he flipped. And if I say maqlub, it means it's upside down. And if I say inqilab, these are all around the same QLB root. That's like a revolution of government, like a flipping of government, like a coup.
Whoa.
Um, so you can see how poetic it is because the heart is flippant. So that things
Oh.
that are upside down or flipped have that same root. I mean, how awesome is that? So I run into this all the time. I'm about 20 or 30 pages into this secret of creation, art of nature. And it's just every other paragraph. They're making allusions with words and structures of words that are similar that you just can't say in English. It's just so hard. And so I have
Wow.
a lot of footnotes. Like, well, see, they wrote it like this, which means, it looks like this, so therefore it
Are they
relates.
doing it allegorically, do you think, in a way?
I think it's a beautiful kind of poetry that would be somewhere in between using the parallel sounds of words with their morphology, how they look written. They
Wow.
do a lot of that to sort of harken back. I mean, we
Wow.
do it in English a lot, but we specifically do it in poetry.
Right. Right.
Um,
And this is just the everyday writing, right?
I would say the way, at least the way these religio-philosophical works were written with a
Hmm.
lot of intent and a lot of intelligence.
Hmm.
But yeah, the everyday words too. There's a lot of that poetry in the everyday words.
Right.
For
Right.
example, just in modern Arabic, so to you, I say good morning and you say good morning
Right.
because we mean have a good morning or isn't it a good morning?
Hmm.
They say sabah al khair, which is morning the good. And the response is sabah nur, morning the light.
Whoa.
How cool is that? That's the everyday language.
Wow.
Beautiful. Just fantastic. Fantastically beautiful way of saying things. So you could, for example, if I wanted to write a paragraph that's esoteric, I could talk about morning the light, sabah nur, and then start messing with that as an allegory because sabah also means like the cracking or the dawn or the breaking of something. And you'll see this in the secret of creation and the art of nature that an idea could break upon you as the same way
Oh.
the sunlight or an enlightenment would. I could just say subah, and instead of he thought or he had an idea, I could say it broke upon him like the dawn, but with just one word.
Holy shit, man.
I mean, how cool is that? And
That's
and
really
that's
cool.
very hard to interpret. Like, how do you interpret? It's not a matter of even just saying like, where does the period go or what verb it is. It's just hard to convey that idea
Oh, and then like
without
you said too,
writing
the
a book on it.
context too at the time, like how were they, what were they trying to convey? What was
Yeah,
that, you know,
yeah.
what
And
were they
some of
trying
it
to teach us?
you have to think like some of it. I can at least a little bit think in Arabic,
Hmm.
which is weird. So I could read that and be like, oh, I know exactly what they're saying. They're saying because they mentioned the light up here, as in like the light of wisdom or the Masonic light, we
Hmm.
would say more light,
Right.
which we know we're not talking about physical light,
Right.
photons.
Hmm.
They know that too. And then the next line might use the term for the dawn of the sun for an idea, which intimates that the idea had to do with the enlightenment just mentioned. If I
Uh,
write that in a way that says that in English, I'm adding a bunch of words. I have to add a bunch of words that are not in the Arabic. So that's where an interpreter has to like find a balance. Do I say it dawned upon him that blah blah blah, or do I say it dawned upon him as an enlightening light
right.
that
Yeah. Yeah.
it's very hard. So I say a lot of footnotes.
Well, I was going to say, yeah, I mean, if, if I was doing it and I'm not, thank God.
Yeah,
And I hope you get the grant. Um,
I hope so
that
too.
that you would go, this is what it says, pretty much what you did here.
Yeah,
What you did here, this is what it says, and this is how you could read it in the context of like everything you just said, right? Like it could mean that
could mean yeah.
it could mean this, like or based on the previous text, the later text implicates that you could be reaching for like but that's a lot of work, John. that's a,
It's a ton of work.
that's a
Ton
ton
of
of
work.
work.
And I could get close to it, and it might not be right, but like I said, hopefully someone else will come along and be like,
Yeah,
Gilbert didn't interpret this line right, or he didn't translate, or he misread that word, and can come along and build on that.
yeah. But at least you're laying a foundation. For God's sakes, there's no foundation right now.
I wish they'd write it right now so I could use their book to write. It would be a lot easier, man.
What is it called? Retrocausality, man. Somebody already
Retro causality.
yeah, so you already did. You just got to use it now. So somebody else already wrote the book. You just got
I
to
think
like,
that's your next book,
oh
Retro
yeah.
Causality. I think you should use that title. I think it's golden. Go for it.
Okay, cool. Retro causality it is.
Yeah, let's do it, man. We could be
Mhm.
on Rose Circle,
Let's
Rose
do
Circle
it.
Books. That's where mine is. By the way, I have to plug that Rose Circle Books. Piers Vaughn.
There you
Oh,
go.
froze a little bit, but Piers Vaughn runs that. It's a great resource for the serious Western esotericist or the student of Western esoteric tradition and philosophy. You
Yes.
got to go to Rose Circle Books or rosecircle.com.
Yeah.
Rose Circle Books. See, actually, I have it pulled up here. There's one that's Rose Circle that's totally different.
It's rosecirclebooks.com.
Yeah, it's
It's
Rose
rose circle
Circle
book.
Books. Uh,
Rosecirclebooks.com.
yeah, and you got to check that out. There's a ton of great authors on there. I'm just can't believe that I'm even on the same web page as these guys.
Oh, stop it.
They're amazing. They really are. The eloquence. That's my litmus test of how good a book is when I'm jealous. That's when I know it's a good book. I'm like, God, I hate
Ah.
this guy. God, this author here
Damn it. I'm gonna buy him a drink
really
and
nailed
fucking tell him he's great.
it. I know it, man. If I see that guy,
I'm gonna see him in Louisville, and that's it.
really good. No, that's I'm glad you liked it, and
Oh, dude, I love it.
I hope it raises questions. I hope it does because I go through. I think how it's organized is
Yeah.
I go through and I tell the history, and
Yep.
here's what we think. Here's what the normal view of the Emerald Tablet, and as above, so below. And here's kind of what we think it means.
Right.
But then I propose the thesis, which is maybe we need to re-examine that. So
Yeah.
I go through the translation process of the what I would call the mistranslations or the slightly errant translations,
Right.
and how that came to be,
With
and then I
evidence.
propose a
Boom, boom,
new
boom, boom, boom.
translation.
Yeah. And then
Yeah.
yeah. Mm.
And I think in that process, you go, oh, it isn't just a guy come up with a new translation, and I don't like what they said, and you start to
No.
see like, oh, I see how some of these other translations were just a little weird and maybe a little off. Like one example I put in there is that
Yeah.
one of the early manuscripts, even the native Arabic speaker who wrote one of the manuscripts by hand.
I like this part. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a word that is in we see it in the Emerald Tablet all the time. It says it's the word that.
Yep.
So it is true that the above is from the below is from the above. That little conjunction that in there,
Mhm.
little particle,
Yeah.
is written like a stick in a crescent. Okay,
Mhm.
it's
Mhm.
called in. That's the word. But if you don't pick your pen up, it makes this little slur in between, makes it lenna, which negates everything after. It means it is true and correct that the above is not from the below, and the below is not from the above, and everything they say after that is not true,
Yeah.
simply because the guy didn't pick his pen up all the way. And you could easily read that incorrectly if you don't have a bunch of sources in front of you. It's just really weird.
And that could be that just gets copied, right? That
It
gets
just gets
copied. It gets
copied
copied
over. Yeah,
over and over and
someone
over.
will say like that's the authoritative, and then along with the copy, the idea starts coming down
Hmm.
that this is all about balance and symmetry, and it's about something being like something else because I heard that once, and
No,
maybe it's not.
no, it's
And
not.
it's probably just reading it in its context was the idea of alchemy as we understand it was probably very far from the mind of the writer.
Right.
They weren't really talking a lot about elements or alchemical processes. They're in the context of something else, which was Greco-Egyptian philosophy of the soul, and the Greco-Egyptian cosmology around the Hermetic stories, which were fairly Platonic, but also sort of mixed with this Egyptian set of ideas. Very
Yeah,
cool, very unique.
I love it. I like you on page 6. You just go, all right, before we're going to screw around, this is what my translation. and,
Right.
and I like how you do it, man. You're like, this is it. And then let's just talk about it. Right.
Yeah,
And
I thought it was fair to not make it a mystery sort of.
no, yeah, do it right there. Just tell it, man. And you tell it. I mean, you say it through
Right.
the,
Page 6, like right up front. So there's an intro, and I
yeah,
think page 6 is the first page of the first chapter
it
proper.
is. It's the first page of the first chapter.
Yeah.
And I'm going to
Yeah.
read it because it's fucking great.
Yeah,
This is
would
it.
you?
Do you
I
mind?
don't even have a copy here. I don't even have a hard copy.
It's hard.
Yeah, you got a copy. All I have is PDFs of
You're the
me.
fucking author.
Tens of dollars, I tell
Tens
you.
of dollars.
Tens.
You should check your account, man. I've sent you tens of
That's,
dollars for this
I
book.
know, man. It's great. No, go ahead and read that
This is
Emerald Tablet translation. This is
it. I love it. This is it. You're like, hey, look, just because this is what you wrote first, so there's no ambiguity throughout the rest of the book. Let's start with what I can call a rectified translation of the Emerald Tablet, which is great. You said it right up, page 6, right? All right. Without a doubt, it is correct. That's one line. That's it. That the above is from the below, and the below is from the above.
yeah,
Okay. Yeah. That's
unambiguously says that.
nothing else. That's it. That's what it says. There was, yeah, don't get it confused. He worked the wonders from one, as all things were from one by a single move. The next line. His father is the sun, his mother is the moon. The wind carried him in her belly, the earth nourished him. Father of talismans, treasurer of wonders, full of powers. Treasurer, sorry. Father of talismans, treasurer of wonders, full of powers. My bifocals are.
That's all right. I've got them too.
Fire yielded some earth, isolating the earth from the fire. The ethereal is more noble than the dense. An ethereal, maybe I'm pronouncing it wrong. Yeah, the ethereal is more noble than the dense. Gently and wisely, he ascends from the earth to the sky and descends to the earth from the sky. And in him is the power of the above and the below. Because with him is the light of lights, therefore darkness flees from him. Which reminds me of a Bible verse right there. Right? Power of powers. He surmounts everything ethereal. He penetrates everything dense. Toward the formation of the macrocosm and the microcosm, he brings forth the work. This is my glory, and that is why I am called Hermes, thrice wise. There you go.
Yeah. And yeah, that's even having heard that back, it's a pretty profound set of statements.
It is. Every single one could be like you said. I mean, it's 13 lines. Well, I think it's more than 13 lines. I don't know. No, probably not. It's 13.
It depends on how you write it. Some people write it 13, sometimes it's 17 lines. Because again, there was no punctuation and it wasn't written out in any standard format. If you look at the manuscripts, it's just how much room they have on the page.
Right. Yeah, we can fit it in there. But the way you wrote it is amazing. I like the way you wrote it, and I like
I appreciate it. Notice in there how it says him and he a lot.
It does.
Because I think what was overlooked in a lot of the translation was the very first verb, which was he worked.
He worked the wonders from one. Yeah.
Yeah, it's unambiguously in the original.
Sorry, like his and him. There's a lot of he, right?
Yeah, you notice that in some of the previous translations, it says like it a lot. There's a sort of ambiguous it, like it did this and it did that and it ascended and it descended, which makes it a Barnum statement. You can apply in there anything you want it to be quite often, and people do. So there's lots of books, probably hundreds of books that talk about the Emerald Tablet, probably thousands of books really, and there's all these variations of what it could mean.
Right.
But when you have in Arabic, when the introductory verb is masculine, first person past tense, all of those attached pronouns, instead of becoming it, become he, him, his. It's all that. So
right.
So it's he works the wonders from one. It's his this. It's his that. He did this, and that makes it's pretty clear in Arabic by the rules of Arabic grammar that that's how it works. And that's how it works in the Quran, which is contemporaneous with this.
Right.
So if you want to go to the Holy Quran and try to look like, well, doesn't men and men, doesn't that mean the above is like the below and the below is like the above? You'll not see a single comparison like that in the Quran, which is a huge body of work written in the same kind of language around the same time.
Right.
No, you just won't find it. And you will find that the leading verb then flavors how those attached pronouns are going to be, which is a little bit of a weird concept in Arabic. But so the way you say something is, one of the ways you say something is his or its, is by attaching an H to the end of it, essentially an H, but you have to determine from context whether that means it or him, and you get that from the verb.
Oh yeah. So it's like a, it's, how, what would it be in English? It's,
Um,
not,
Gosh, that's a tough one.
not an,
Almost like how you can determine whether to say resume or resume based on
uh,
context.
yeah. So, yeah, really. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Polish or Polish.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there you go. There's things you just have to know, but it's fairly straightforward in Arabic, but most of your early translators missed that one.
But it changes the whole context for me anyway.
Yeah.
From being familiar from, the mistranslations for all, and I call them mistranslations because they were.
Yeah. I mean, I would say they are, yeah, they would probably mistranslations, or at least a lot of what's in there is a mistranslation in anyone's translation or interpretation.
Yeah.
Because why would you say it does this and it does this, and there's this ambiguous one, and there's this thing doing this thing, and you don't really define it, and at the very end it says, and that's why I am called Hermes, Trismegistus. It's a
It
story
does all
about
this stuff, and that's why I'm called Hermes. Like,
yeah,
what?
it's about Hermes. That's
Yeah.
the whole point of it. It's about Hermes. Hermes did all that work.
Yeah.
Hermes was called all these things, like the father of talismans, master of wonders. And then when you read The Secret of Creation, you find that Apollonius starts calling himself by those same epithets
Re-
as after he does that journey inward and discovers the Emerald Tablet, now he is a master of talismans.
Oh,
See? It
wow.
is the same concept in Western, and I'll probably catch a lot of flack for this, the same concept in Western esotericism as becoming the Christ or the Christos.
Aha.
Journey inward in Gnostic flavored
Right.
systems,
Yep.
discover the Christos, and then you become it. And so this was a similar concept. You're journeying inward towards the Logos,
Hmm.
towards the Hermes,
Hmm.
and you discover written upon the Emerald Tablet, which you could argue is the soul, that art of nature. And then he emerges from that crypt. He emerges from that journey, and now he is the master of talismans.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and it's such a cool story. I'd love to do a film someday. So if
Yeah.
anyone wants to fund that,
I'm in.
yeah,
I've
I should
already
put my
given you
Venmo
tens of
behind me.
dollars. I've already given
No,
I've already given you tens of dollars.
send it in care of this station. Right, you make your checks payable too.
I will send it right now. I'll be in it. I'll
That'd
act
be
for free.
great.
I'll
You
act
can
for
be my
free.
perfected self.
It'll make me waste this whiskey.
I should have grabbed a whiskey. I was drinking iced tea. So,
Oh, that's all right.
yeah, it's a fantastic story, and
It's
this is
amazing.
the kind of thing I want people to see. And I'm curious to see what the rest of the book says, because I'm barely scratching the surface.
I
I'm
can't
like, what
imagine.
is
Like,
this going to say? Like, what is this going to say about the creation story and Hermeticism, and what's it going to say?
I don't know, but I can't wait to get into it either. It's almost like, yeah, but
It's a sizable book, yeah, but
yeah, yeah,
we'll get it. I think if I get this grant, I'll be working on it during summer vacation, when the schools are out,
yeah.
and I will get a large chunk of it done.
Mm,
And then I would hope to have it done by the end of the year. And then there's going to be some post, writing,
yeah.
organization and notes and proofreading and things like that.
Editing and all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
And man, yeah. So I'd love to see it out within a couple of years, but it's one of the projects I'm working on, and I'd like to do that because I have other projects I'd like to do,
That's amazing. I mean,
other books.
just getting that. I mean, what do you think is hidden in there? It's got to be a lot. I mean, there's got to be.
I don't know. And academics know these things, and this is what I said at that talk in Louisville,
Yeah.
that you're a Rosicrucian scholar or Masonic scholar, and that is fantastic.
Hmm.
But there's things about ancient literature that sort of your average third year college student who studies these things at university knows, because they learned to read Latin, and now they're reading the Latin translation of this if they're into it. There are people out there doing this right now, and maybe they don't have the background in Hermeticism. Maybe they don't know anything about Masonry. They're not interested in the spirituality of the soul, but they certainly understand exactly where this book came from, probably very close to exactly what it says.
Hmm.
It's just not that important for them to have a podcast or write a book about. It's just part of their studies,
Right, right. So it's just like kind of lost into the wind, right? It's just kind of one of those
Yeah.
things where it's like we got
So
to
I
find.
encourage people to get academic. Go to the academic sources. Try to hit up university libraries. Do what you can
Yeah,
to get to the root of this stuff.
I'm sure it might be out there. I mean, it could be. It
Yeah.
very well could be. It could be out there, or it could be a co-opted work too. We get enough people involved in it and take pieces of it and parts of it and kind of
Yeah.
do it all together. I mean, I think it'd be rad. I'm excited about it for some reason. Um, I read a book called from Mark Booth. It's a pseudonym, but it was The Secret History of the World. I don't know if you're
Oh,
familiar with that
cool.
one. Yeah, but it's pretty interesting where it kind of long. He takes a lot of the old esoteric texts and he kind of puts it in some kind of order and
But I,
um,
I think I've heard of this. I may have even
yeah,
glanced through it. Yeah.
yeah. It's got the all-seeing eye on the cover. I mean, that's what I was
Very
in.
cool.
I was in an airport at one point and I was like, I need something to read, and I was like,
That
oh
seems
shit, that looks
familiar.
cool. Yeah,
That see before the internet, and I sound like such a fogey, but before the internet, I was in a bookstore, and
hmm
that's where I first ran into Graham Hancock's work. I
yeah,
saw Prince of the Gods sitting around the bookshelf, and I said, "Well, that's interesting," and
yeah,
I read it, and I was blown away.
yeah,
And then I got like Holy Blood, Holy Grail
yeah,
by Lomas, and I can't remember the other author's name.
yeah.
Lomas and I had a brief communication back and forth about some of that a long time ago, back in the 90s or something. I don't
That's
know.
awesome.
I still got the email somewhere.
That's
Well, really
awesome.
cool guy, really well read.
Yeah.
Just impressive stuff. So I still think books are where the big arguments, where the long arguments are written. You can get a lot from websites and videos and stuff, but the complete and detailed arguments are still in books, and I think that's where to go. So I encourage our younger viewers, uh, go hit up
Read.
some books. Yeah, and you'll notice that a lot of podcasts like this are talking about books.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
they're saying, go get a book, go read that thing, because you're going to find there's nothing we can say that's going to simulate or replicate reading that book or reading, Lomas's book or read, any of that stuff.
Right. Right.
So yeah, I think it's great. And I read whenever I can. But I have another book I'd like to work on. It's about the magic of swordsmithing. And it's not really a totally different subject. It's I do blacksmithing on the side.
Shit.
Uh, yeah, just and I wish I had more time for it. But and this is another it's another thing where there's a gap in the Western esoteric tradition that I've been looking at.
Yeah.
We know we have a ton of stuff about magic swords in lore and legend and stuff from Norse legend on through you name it, Arthurian legend, stuff like
Right.
that. So we
Right.
know about this idea that magic swords are supposed to be entities; they're a personality.
Mm-hmm.
And we also know from even the Norse sagas and Icelandic sagas and things like that that blacksmiths were supposed to be magic, and
Mm-hmm.
that when they made the magic sword, there was some sort of magical operation.
Right.
There's no description of that. What was the ritual? What was the ceremony? What were they doing?
Hmm.
Well, we know enough from literature and the evolution of ceremonial and ostensibly magic swords. We could probably infer using that and what we know of Japanese swordsmithing, which is
Oh,
very well documented.
it is.
We could probably infer possibly what might have gone on in the smithies of these magic blacksmiths, what was really
Wow.
happening there. So that's sort of something I've been compiling notes on. I have like 80 pages of notes. I need to work on that book, but I'd love to get to that one.
Wow.
I think it's great. We have Masonic swords.
Mm-hmm.
The Templars have swords. The various organizations all have swords. They're all highly symbolic.
Yeah.
What is it about iron? What is it about what gives them a soul? What are they?
Mm-hmm.
What happens in that magic blacksmithing? I have some ideas. I hope to write that down.
I think you should. I have one, but I think it goes back to Tubal Cain, but I think you probably know that.
Yeah, well, tell us about it. That's
uh,
cool. I mean, that's the
I mean,
artificer.
yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know if I should say that out loud, but
Yeah, well,
shit.
what's the Bible say
Oh
about
yeah, oh yeah, yeah.
that's public domain, I think.
It is. It is. It is. I think he's there.
Yeah.
Let me kill
Yeah,
the
I do.
video again and pop it off again. Let's see. Oh, you're back. Okay, cool. Yeah. See, so we talk about shit like that, the video stops.
Yeah.
It's like,
No, but you're
hmm,
even in the Bible, there's magic.
mm-hmm.
There's a magic of metalsmithing,
Yes,
and it had to do with the construction of Solomon's temple.
it did.
So all these cultures have these traditions, and the Japanese swordsmithing culture, especially post World War II, has been extremely well documented.
Wow.
Know what they were doing. One of the
Hmm.
things they were doing was that the smithy, the place where the blacksmith works, it becomes a sacred space. It becomes a temple.
Oh,
It becomes essentially a magic circle. And then
yep.
so the priest is essentially delivering as if this is the forge is giving birth to this being into the world. The sword
Wow.
comes out. I think this is probably a very similar process that happened in the West, and I would like to flesh that out and detail it with what we know of Western esoteric traditions and operative ritual,
Like it
what
had
that
to
might
tied
look
to the
like.
Templars and everything else, right? I mean, it
Yeah,
had
I
to. Yeah.
mean, the sword is this huge symbol, but the knights, obviously samurai were knights
Hmm.
and the equivalent of Western knights, and they all had a sort of a religion of the sword.
Right.
And these things were considered entities, and they still are,
And
really.
they're passed down for generation to generation. I mean, like it never.
Yeah.
They weren't buried with their swords, were they? I don't know. I'm
I
ignorant on
don't
that
know
part.
how it was done in which period in Japan.
Hmm.
Not an expert, but like even in Bronze Age and early Iron Age, Celtic and Germanic
Oh yeah.
um, cultures, they would bend the swords and throw them into the water or something. They had to go on to the afterlife, with the warrior, or to take their power away so that they wouldn't come kill you. The sword, they were considered entities, and anyone who's messed with a magic sword or a ceremonial sword, and who's done any kind of ritual with one, knows that they can show up sometimes in your dreams or in your visions, and they can do stuff, and
I've
they act like an entity.
I've only had one of those,
Yeah.
and I don't yeah, and I don't even pretend to know. But I think I told you this. I was attempted to be handed a sword. It was an entity. It was a white lady. I don't know, a woman in white, the white lady. What color, what you want, Hathor, whoever, right? Cloaked white, trying to hand me a sword.
Interesting.
And two figures behind her that were cloaked that were just kind of there as like guardians, like I have to do what she says,
Wow.
I'm just like I'm not doing it again. I'm not going to do it again. And it's like you have to do it again, and I'm like I'm not doing it again. And it was coming out of the northeast, and it was like in my space now, in my backyard, like coming at me. And there's a sycamore tree there, which is weird because I found that ties to it as well. Like the lady, like all this stuff kind of ties to sycamore. And so it's coming at me, just trying to hand me the sword is like I had to do battle or I had to do something. And I'm just like refusing, like, nah, I'm done this time. I'm like, I'm out. I'm out. And it was like, it
It's amazing.
was one of those weird things where I'm like, I mean, I have my Templar sword, right? Because I'm a Knights Templar, but I don't, I don't have it. This was way before that, right? I've only became a Templar last year. So, but
Well,
this was like,
congratulations.
thanks. Yeah. But it was just kind of like one of those things where it was like, she's giving, and it was like as real as I'm talking to you, right? And I'm just
Yeah.
like, and I had this
Been there,
just,
done that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But and to
Well, these
me,
things
like
are
it,
entities. They really are, and it's the idea in the Western traditions that if the human being an ensouled, well, someone put it an enfleshed soul, a soul
oh, I like that one.
flesh prison. In Hermetic terms, it's being immersed in the zodiac. The zodiac is a description almost like the seven deadly sins. It's like
Wow.
12 deadly sins, and you're supposed to transcend them. Um, a sword is an entity, and therefore, like us, it should have an astral self as well. It
Wow.
should have some sort of soul. It should exist on other planes as well. So if you are attuned to your Templar sword properly through the proper rituals, etc. Okay.
So
So
you're
in the
saying if you're in tune with the Templar sword,
Yeah, you should be able to summon it
yeah.
in your dreams. It should have an astral self as well, just like you do in the Western tradition. And also, if you are able to conduct a ritual to achieve a different state or a different plane, whether that's you think that's completely psychological or if that's physically you're trans.
Are you back? You're back.
See, once this stuff gets interesting, NSA
It's-
shuts it down, man.
I'm serious, man. Like what AI is monitoring this fucking
I
chat?
know it, dude.
That's so fucked up.
So, but
It's
yeah,
true.
the thing I want to talk about with swords is that
Yeah.
whether you believe it or not is not the point of the book. The point of the book is to sort of document and maybe reconstruct what may have gone on in these smithies, because that's one instructional book that's not out there is instructional book for blacksmiths on how to make esotericists their swords. You know, how
Yeah,
do you
that's
give
it.
it a soul?
It's the
You know,
mouth to ear thing, right? That probably only exists mouth to ear.
if it exists anymore. You know,
Mm,
I know some blacksmiths in Europe, and they've essentially had to reassemble or recreate what they think things were supposed to be. Been I don't, think of it this way, like chainmail, for example.
hmm.
The humans have known how to make chainmail since Roman times, and
Right.
then around the time it started going out of use, we actually forgot how to make it. We do
Really?
not know to this day exactly how medieval blacksmiths extruded the wire to make the chainmail. We know they extruded wire, and thousands upon thousands upon thousands of smiths did this day in and day out.
But nobody knows how to do it.
No one wrote it down, and all the tools were reclaimed for their steel. So all if they used dies and pulled things with pliers, we don't know. We really don't know how they made it. And we reinvented wire extrusion in the Industrial Revolution.
Wow.
It was a lost art, a lost science, a lost industrial method. And it, again, stands to reason that a lot of these things were probably just lost when the demand went away.
That's amazing. Well, you
Yeah.
know I found a parallel somehow is that this is true. You can look this up that after the Apollo missions, the FBI came in and seized all of the documentation from NASA. Oh, let me see. See, here we go talking good shit again. And then as soon as we start talking good shit, as soon as I start saying something good,
Still not
is
hearing you.
how about now? I can hear you. I can
There
hear
you
you.
go. All you gotta
Okay.
do is mention the Apollo missions, and you
I
got
know.
it.
That's it. So when those missions happened after they were done in like 19
Okay.
those missions in 73, the FBI shit I said that too. They
Oh,
came in, yeah, and then they came in and took all of the plans for all like all the capsules, all the space suits, everything they had, right? And took it. And guess what they did with it? Fucking burned it.
really?
So right
Now,
now, if we
I
wanted to
just
go
saw a
back to the moon,
special
we can't do it. We don't have any of the, we don't have any of the, we don't zero, we can't tell you how to make a spacesuit. We can't, the spacesuit that we can't tell you what they did to make that.
dude, I saw a thing it was weird just last night on the F1 engine that oh, you locked up. Have you got me?
Yeah, I got you, but you locked up too. I mean, I'm
Oh,
moving,
give it a
but
second. They know what we're talking about. They know.
yeah, yeah, they're fucking, it's just the F1 engine. It's,
Are you seeing me?
not seeing you, but I can hear you.
Okay, we'll give it a second here.
Yep. There you are. There you are.
So the F1 engine that launched
Yep.
those rockets, um, apparently NASA does have all those plans, because we were
Oh,
looking for a throwaway alternative for the space shuttle for the rocket boosters, but we ended up going
uh,
with solid propellant
mhm.
because they had a weird reverse problem, is that we did not have the engineering notes that basically the engineers kept in their head, because each F1 engine had to be tuned individually. It was
Oh,
all very slapdash. It was all brand new. And to get the darn things to work, there were each one had a little tweak and a little pipe and a little thing. None of that was, either half of it wasn't written down, and the other half were just people's personal notes. And that whole generation of people who did that kind of engineering on those kind of materials are gone. So they redesigned it, and it went from 2,000 some odd parts down to 47 parts. So they can rebuild it, just not exactly. They have
wow.
to build it a different way if they were going to build it. It's been redesigned, but they just had that kind of material science is just gone.
Oh,
And this is what we were talking about with the chainmail. It's not impossible to make chainmail. We do it all day, but we have machines that do it now that crank chainmail out. We extrude wire differently. We just forgot how the blacksmiths did it. We don't know how they extruded wire, how they got it. It's the same with Damascus steel. And
yeah.
It's not the stuff we see today is called pattern. It's actually pattern welded steel,
Hmm.
and that was invented in the 70s well, reinvented in the 70s by a knife maker in America.
Hmm.
It's a decorative process, but the actual Damascus steel, we have
Is,
no idea how that stuff was made.
is it, am I completely right? I don't know shit, but is it the idea in my mind when I hear that is that it's a piece of steel that's folded over onto itself and then another
That's
one that's
one way
folded?
that's a way we simulate Damascus steel
Okay.
now.
Okay.
And that would be exactly what you call pattern welded.
Okay. Okay.
Now that was a legit technique used in early medieval from early medieval times. The idea was to spread out the slag that
Mm,
is inherent in a billet of iron made from low quality ore.
okay.
The Vikings made the ore they used was sand, iron bearing sands that washed down from mountains. The Japanese swords were made of this same kind of low grade ore,
Ah,
and they developed folding. So the
okay.
200, times folding,
Hmm.
it did make their blades strong by statistically distributing the slag evenly along the blade, so it didn't all build up in one spot, and you have weak point.
Right. Okay.
If you did that to a modern steel, it wouldn't do anything to it. It wouldn't make it stronger. You'd probably fold in a weakness. You'd probably fold in a mistake.
Ah, okay.
So a modern tool steel is amazing. So
Hmm.
if you modern tool steel is just like a lawnmower blade, it's amazing.
Right.
Take that and you heat it and you fold it 200 times,
Yeah.
it's done nothing to the strength.
It's done nothing to it at all.
It hasn't anything. Same with pattern welding it. But the Northern European solution was to take your billet, break it into thirds, reverse one of them, twist them, re-weld them together, and that's how you get these cool patterns.
Ah,
That was actually
okay.
a side effect of this attempt to sort of make sure the billet was more uniform. And the
Got it.
Japanese had a different method. Yeah.
Wow. Is it, and
Now we
is it,
just have hotter furnaces,
I
better crucible steel. Yeah.
was gonna say that, I mean, but is it still true that some of those Japanese swords are still so sharp that it's like unfathomable, like the way that they did it, and we just don't
all over
understand
the
how?
world,
Yeah.
all over the world, they're finding bronze swords, especially
Bronze
bronze
swords.
oxidized, that are ridiculously sharp.
And we can't do it today. I remember reading that, right? Like we can't make a bronze or a copper sword. Is it, I can't remember one of those two. It's like
Yeah,
a copper sword.
we can. Um, Probably not. Just like all of that stuff, probably not exactly like they did.
Right.
We'd have to make it differently, and probably for good reason. I mean, it's just like the F1 engine. The
Mhm.
people who use those materials and those methods at those time, they're just not there anymore. And you can study your whole life, you know, trying to make steel from the original ores with the original methods, and you could probably get really darn close, but do you have the exact method? No one knows, no one knows. But
Wow.
I would take a modern sword with modern tool steel any day. I really would.
Yeah.
They're great. Yeah, they're great. There's a steel called S7. You could take that sword and I don't know, you can jack a car up with it if you,
Just-
it's gonna be fine.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
breaking anything at all. Yeah. So yeah, these were, the Japanese swords were also, they were pretty good, but they weren't like everyone thinks they're the best swords in the world and the best thing ever made. They were really, really well made, especially in later periods. They got better just like everyone else.
Right.
But they were probably, I think they're unfairly
Mm,
compared to two-handed swords in Europe, but that's
right.
not time period and not the same use.
Hmm.
So samurai fought with spears on the battlefield mainly and
Right.
bows. Same with European soldiers. They fought with pole arms. Swords, generally a personal protection weapon.
Hmm.
Not all the time, not in every situation. But the height of the European personal protection sidearm was the rapier.
Mm,
And I would take a rapier against a katana at any time.
yeah.
They're a super deadly weapon. You know, very deadly. Once they got the idea of again, this was quality of steel, was to
Right.
be able to take the weight from the blade and move it towards the hand so you could build protection for the hand. That really made a very, very, very lethal weapon.
Right. Because you had the protection and the speed and
Protection
everything
and
else.
speed, and they're about the same weight. And people don't realize that a rapier is about the same weight as a two-handed longsword,
Wow. That
about the
heavy.
same weight as a katana.
Wow.
You ask most people, they'll say that a sword was like 10 or 15 pounds. If they get over 3 pounds, you're struggling with them. They're
Wow.
usually three or under. I've had the opportunity to go to museums actually and hold actual swords from the 1500s. And
Shit.
I held a Miramachi samurai blade once. They're the most lively. They just feel alive, lightweight, fast, just a crazy, like it just wants to take off in your hand. They're not heavy at all.
Wow.
Two-handed longsword, just the lightest thing you can imagine.
Really? I always expect them to be like, the Conan the Barbarian, like
No,
400 pounds.
2.5 pounds.
Wow.
Rapier, same way, 2.5 pounds, but most of the weight has been shifted backward, to the
Wow.
hand. So I
That's
think
really,
there's misconceptions we get. Like, Vikings have these giant, heavy swords. No, they didn't. Vikings were your average Viking, from what I have studied, which I'm not an expert in it, but from what I've seen, 5'6" to 5'11", 150 pounds, just like every European of the day.
they weren't all
Because,
6'6" and 250 pounds, huh?
yeah, that's movies.
Mm-mm.
Viking type peoples or the Norse type peoples that Vikings come from, which Viking is an occupation, right? It's
Yeah.
it's a pirate basically.
Yeah.
Um, they're the same level of malnourishment and disease as anyone else,
Right.
And
Right.
having been a soldier in the U.S. Army, there's this misconception, like from video games and movies, that soldiers, are these big, huge, massive people. But no, soldiering is an endurance game.
Hmm.
Your very successful soldiers who stick it out are built like endurance runners,
Yeah.
slim, muscular, lean, but they're not these bulked up guys. You couldn't afford that in the field. You couldn't feed it. You couldn't,
Mm-mm.
transport, feeding, your heat loss from surface area. You spend a shocking amount of your time cold and covered in mud. You wouldn't
an,
want to be,
an
yeah,
abnormal amount of time in covered in
yeah,
shit.
4% body fat, you die. You can't do it.
Nah.
So anyway, we got onto the sword tangent, but
No, no, no.
yeah,
That's
we
that
love
sounds like that
swords.
sounds like a great book, man. I mean, that sounds cool.
I hope so. I hope I get the time to do it. It's just a
You'll
lot
have
of stuff.
time to do. You'll have time to do it.
I hope so. So
Yeah, get those 80 pages out. That's great.
we'll see, man. You got to write your Templar book, man. What did we decide the name of the book was?
Oh, it was retro causality.
Retro Causality, the Templar's Tale.
I'm writing this book from 2045.
You got to do it, bro.
And all of these things have happened.
Yeah, I like it. Let's do it.
I think it's
I think
great.
it'd be great. I think it'd be a great book.
Yeah, why not? Shit.
Get down to it, man.
Yeah, I mean, fuck, why not? At this point, who cares?
Yeah, right.
It
Well, no,
doesn't.
I'm glad you liked it. I'm glad you liked the book.
Yeah, thank you,
I'm glad
man.
that you want to talk about it, and
Yeah,
yeah, just happy to come up there in person. I think we've got a plan. I'm gonna head up
yeah.
your way, and
That's gonna be rad. I'm gonna hijack the studio with you guys and just jump in there because that's gonna be
okay,
fun.
yeah, I'm gonna try to set that up for maybe March
Yeah,
somewhere.
spring break.
We'll try to. Yeah, that's about when I can get away.
Yeah,
Get my classes on pause and head up and hang out. I always love coming up that direction. Got friends up there, and
dude,
it'll be a good time.
dude, you're more than welcome to hang out here the whole time if you want, anytime you want, whatever you
I
want.
appreciate it. Yeah, I'll
Yeah,
bring a sword.
yeah. If you show up with a fucking sword and a white lady comes out of the northeast, that's it.
I'll set it up. I'll set it up. I've got some friends up there. We can stage about anything.
Walk out back and be like, "Oh, this is it.
Get a
This
few
is it."
drinks, get a few drinks in you, and then I'll
Yeah.
be like, "Hey, man, I'm gonna step out the backyard for a smoke or something. You want to check it out?" Yeah, I'll
Fuck.
have one of my friends hover in with a sword, like on a drone or something.
Fucking UFO just flies over the top. I'm
And if I
done.
can arrange that, man, I've got more money than sense at that point.
Yeah, you have to worry about
My
selling
friends are
more
gonna
books at that point. Fuck that.
come.
Just,
Dude, yeah, man. So
that's gonna
yeah,
be so
happy to
good.
come up and talk about whatever. But
No,
those are my things, man.
it's gonna be rad. Let's do this again, man. Sorry, like do it again where the Zoom doesn't fuck us up too.
Yeah, I know it'd be great, man. Well,
Yeah.
hopefully you got some useful material here and can
Yeah.
weave something together. And
Yeah, I'll be editing for a week.
Yeah. Now it's working perfectly.
I know, right? It's just like, ah, it's
Yeah.
all done. It's like, yeah, yeah,
We're
you
not
guys are.
talking about anything untoward.
No, it fucking does
Hey,
it to me all the time. It does it to me all the time.
man,
Like I've had it a couple times where I was talking about some stuff and things went sideways, but
it's the AI, dude.
it's just keywords, probably,
Throttling
right?
your bandwidth, bro.
Yeah,
Or it's busy looking it up, like, oh, would you like to see 500 ads on aliens?
yeah.
Here you go.
Oh, Japanese swords. Fucking, I'm gonna 500 ads for Japanese swords.
Dude,
Japanese
yeah,
steakhouse.
swords are a big thing with me. I studied swords a long time ago. I taught fencing at a military school.
Holy shit!
Just love it. I lived with a swordsmith in Scotland for a while.
No way.
Really cool. A buddy of mine taught me how to make knives. He up there. He was the first one to really show me anything on a forge.
Wow.
I was just backpacking around Europe, and this guy named Stevie Jones, who's passed away.
Mm.
He he was just fantastic. Just just showed me how to do stuff like that. Was a super cool guy. Took me in. I eventually took my son there years ago and met him, and he had gone blind by that point.
Oh no.
And but even blind on the Isle of Skye, Scotland, he taught my son how to shoot a bow and arrow.
What?
What a cool story is that my
What?
son's got from here on out.
Wow, dude.
He was taught how to shoot bow and arrow by a blind bladesmith on the Isle of Skye, Scotland. I'm like, man, I can't even get a cool story like that, man. Come on, dude. But yeah,
Wow.
rest his soul. What a great guy.
That's
So,
amazing. Dude, I would have no idea what I was doing. I mean, I don't know. My dad was a metal model maker. So he worked for uh Jeep, Chrysler, GM, like whatever. Oh, they would take
oh wow.
plans and they would have to make wooden forms, and then he would take steel and have to fucking make fenders and whatever else for all the
Whoa.
experimental, prototype vehicles and shit. So I got some pictures of
Crazy.
him like making cool shit in the '60s, right? Like just,
Yeah, yeah.
but they would take, make the forms and then just beat metal onto this form to make a fucking fender, right? And stuff like
Wow.
that. So I grew up with like, him just going, yeah, like it would just be weird shit. Like here's a piece of steel and here's a big hammer and we're just going to beat this thing and make it a shape. And it's like, okay. So I learned that, but heated up and doing things, but I didn't, he wasn't making swords or any of that stuff. I was just kind of like, oh, you can bend metal. And, he went through metallurgy school, all that kind of stuff, to do all that. But, he always wanted to be a blacksmith too, like, like a proper one. And like, it's
Yeah.
expensive and it's hard. And like, you don't know anybody and all that stuff. And,
Especially pre-internet, right? You
oh
couldn't just,
yeah.
I mean, I've looked up a whole ton of stuff and found my equipment that way. I think I started up with $500 and half of that was the anvil.
Oh,
But
wow.
I managed to get a good anvil, a 1912 anvil that a guy
Oh
had.
shit.
I think I bought it for $2 a pound, which is great. You're paid
Wow.
well more than that. And just start doing it. I encourage everyone just to get the stuff, get the videos, be safe, try it, hit some metal. You're gonna love it. You know, it's a great time. It's a great time. Don't wait for it to be a retirement job. Just
Yeah.
do it now. Do it on the weekend.
So do you
Yeah.
making knives and stuff still and swords and
I
like,
was I got more interested in making tools. I made my own tools for the forge, and I just have not had the time to get back there because of work and things
oh
like that.
yeah.
And really writing has really consumed most of my time. But I'm working on a sword right now for a guy. I just you can't get back to it. I just get I go out there for a day, and I think I got sick for like 3 weeks, and I couldn't get back
Mm,
to it. So I'll try to get back to it. I think around Christmas I started working on a sword for a guy. I really enjoy it. It's just don't have a lot of time for it.
we got to build the egregore around the forge.
Well, that's going to be in the book.
Yeah.
That's certainly mentioned in the Japanese smithing that the spirits are there. They do invocations.
Mm-hmm.
So there's an egregore there. There, it's a holy process.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to emulate that a little bit. Yeah, and you really, I mean, it sounds a bit woo, but there's a certain point in smithing the blade that it just feels alive. I don't really know how to describe it other
That's
than there's
awesome.
a certain point. It's right after you hammer the bevels in.
Mm-hmm.
So it's basically taking you got maybe a rectangular cross section, and by the time you make it a bladed cross section, basically with some edges to it, it just feels different. It feels
Wow.
like steam, and it's amazing. It changes. You haven't even changed the weight distribution on the thing. It's already a shape, and then you just hammer these bevels into it, and then all of a sudden it just feels different.
Wow. Is
So
it the sound too? And in my mind, I always think it's like maybe is it This does the sound change as well? Like when you get to a certain point of
I don't think so. I mean, there's a little bit of a sound change during some of the heat treating
okay,
process, but that's more of you're looking at the light.
okay,
That's another interesting thing to think of. I mean, the elemental processes that go into it,
hmm
you've got the water, you've got air, you've
fire,
got fire,
yeah, earth,
you've got earth represented by the coals if you use coal.
hmm
But when you burn charcoal, which was for the most part was charcoal in ancient times. Only, yeah, when you start a charcoal fire, you're actually releasing the photons, the actual sunlight from when that tree captured those photons when it was alive.
holy
You're
shit, never
actually
thought about that.
shining light onto this steel, and I would say causing it to come into life.
Wow.
Parallel here is take a planet like Earth, take everything that Earth had before there was ever an organic molecule, there was no life, set it very far away from the sun, and it stays a frozen rock. The most complex molecule you'll have are crystal structures, so repetitive structures of somewhat complex crystals, somewhat
Right.
complex molecules. But really, all you do is shine light at it, and you have intelligence, consciousness, questions. That's really all that's been added to the planet. There wasn't really anything else added, as far as
Right.
we're aware.
Right.
Well, all you do is shine light at this frozen rock, and now you've got DNA. To
Yeah.
me, these are miraculous processes of light, and you'll find that in the Hermetica. You'll find a lot of talk about that. So
Yes.
I encourage people to look into that. So I'm going to try to tie that all in on my sword book. We'll see.
That'll be perfect.
It will
Oh.
sell tens of more dollars sales.
Be 15 blacksmiths in Europe.
Yeah,
They're gonna buy.
15 dudes are like, this book's great. And then that's it.
And then that's it.
Nothing with popular appeal for good reason too. I'm trying to find the gaps and trying to write in the gaps. So
Oh no, man. Just keep
try
doing
to.
you. That's what I think that's all we can ever do, man. Just keep doing
Yes,
you.
sir. Yes, sir. But
That's
yeah, man, it's
been rad,
and
man.
you go on talking about that one too.
Yeah. For all of them. I've got to read the other books and then I got to bring you back on for the rest of them.
Yeah, yeah. Hopefully it goes on for a while, man.
Oh yeah. I gotta go back and buy the rest of your books and bring them on.
I'm down with that too.
Good. Good. Because when I have my book, I'm just gonna send it to you.
Hey, look, if you want a really a good one, I would say a good one to read. I'm proud of my version of the Bhagavad Gita, which is called the Song of God.
Oh yeah.
And the Bhagavad Gita, for anyone who doesn't know, it was a conversation between Krishna, who, if you know anything about Indian mythology, that's sort of the Christ figure. I mean,
Mhm.
there's some parallels.
Yep.
And this hero. So Krishna is this Christ figure, and he's the chariot driver for the hero Arjuna. And they are in between the battle lines before a great battle is going to take place. And they start talking about the philosophies of life and how to achieve enlightenment.
Mm.
And they talk about the yogas, which are the paths,
Mm-hmm.
and in great detail. This is a fantastic book, but I found that the language and the need to know Hindu cosmology would probably be very off-putting
Right.
to a lot of people, a lot of
Right.
readers. I think there's a lot of wisdom in here.
Yeah.
So I took the whole thing and set it in an M1 tank as a conversation between the tank commander and the driver in the first Gulf War.
That's rad.
The night before it kicks off, right in between the battle lines, they're a scout group and they're out there, and then they begin to have the same conversation, just in American English,
That's
which is
rad.
sort of my jam.
I gotta check that out, man. That sounds awesome.
If you go to Rose Circle Books
Yep.
and you find the paragraph about the book that's in the background there, the not as above, not as below. If you go down, the hyperlinks aren't obvious, but there's a hyperlink to every one of my books on Amazon down at the bottom of the paragraph on Rose Circle.
Oh, cool, cool.
Yeah, so it'll take you right there, or you can just go to Amazon, look my name up,
Boom.
find this book as above, so below, and you should be able to link to the other books.
Hell
But
yeah.
the Song of God was one I'm particularly proud of, and I think it's an important work for not necessarily my book is important, but the Bhagavad Gita is important for people to read and have a look at.
So the Bhagavad Gita reminds me the one thing that I know of it, aside from esoteric studies, is that what Oppenheimer said. After he released the first atomic bomb. I've become
Yeah,
death,
quote of the
destroyer of
Bhagavad Gita.
worlds. Yeah, he quoted the Bhagavad Gita. Yeah, I become death, destroyer of worlds. And have you seen that video of him saying it?
Mhm.
In the look in his
Creepy.
eyes, he's just like, he's
Creepy.
like, I fucking, he's got a cigarette too. He's like he just,
He's like Rod Serling's older brother on heroin. You know?
that's a
Yeah,
perfect description, man. It is.
but I
It's all,
recommend people read it. Any
yeah.
book, any version of it you can get your hands on, read it. I always recommend one. I can't remember the actual compiler, but the forward is by Aldous Huxley.
Oh, okay.
And so that's a fantastic forward. It's a really well written version. I lean on it heavily because I don't speak Sanskrit or read it or anything like that. So I'd use several versions, English versions, to sort of arrive at my story of it
Right.
and put it in. I would say trying to use Western and Masonic type symbolism that's a little bit more Western, and try to not have the Eastern stuff that people have to look up and think about in that context. Not that that's wrong or anything. It's just I was trying to write for a different audience. You
No, well,
know,
that's good, man. I'm gonna check it out because a lot of it is just it's real heady. I mean, the Bhagavad you try to get into it, you're just like, what? And the seventh this and the 12th that, and like,
easy read, and I'll show you.
it's like, I
Got
don't, yeah,
an early print of it here. Just a I was saying it's only that thick. It's 100 pages.
yeah,
It's pretty. I don't know. I think you could probably read it in a few hours.
sweet. I'm
Yeah,
in.
so I recommend that one, or any version you can get your hands on.
I'm in.
Really, really profound work.
Oh
You know.
yeah,
Yeah, man.
dude. Let's do this again sometime.
Yeah, let's do it, man.
Sorry, it took
Yeah.
your whole night up.
No, that's great, and it's just the video freezing up that's taking the whole night up.
I know it fucking blows. Pisses me
That's
off.
okay, man.
Yeah,
But
I'll chap it
we
all together.
overcome these things. Do you see me now?
I
Still?
I do still. Yeah, there you're back. Yeah, you're back.
Okay, yeah, man. Well, look, man. Thanks for having me on.
Always.
We
You're
could we
always
could talk
welcome
at
back.
length about anything, man. So
Yeah, we just do a
anything you
weekly.
want to chat on, let's do it.
We just do a weekly.
Yeah, let's do it weekly, and then maybe the NSA will show up at our door. Who knows? I don't
Yeah,
know.
I've yeah, I'm
But
waiting for the van to show up.
if they're listening, if you need me to work on aliens, I'm there. That'll get me back in. But otherwise, leave me the hell alone. I'm enjoying being out of the army.
There you go. And,
So
and don't come at me.
yeah, no, get him, man. Get him.
You can come. I'll just be an advisor, like an analyst on the side. I'll do all the.
Templar
Fuck,
secrets.
yeah. Fuck it. Fuck it. I'll go too. Screw it. Who cares?
Do it. Yeah, you go too, man. Work
I'll
on
go.
aliens together.
Yeah, we'll do it. Fuck it.
John, good to see you, man.
I love you, brother. Thank you so much, man.
Love you too, man. I'll see you in person, hopefully, really soon.
Hell yeah.
All right, bro. Have a good night, man. I'll talk to you later.
Thanks. Take care, man.
Take care. Bye now.
Bye bye.